Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on the penultimate episode of Neon Genesis Evangelion. I can't believe we're here. I can't believe we're on the final 2 episodes. We still have a lot of movies to get through, and I want to talk about that. I have a lot of notes. I have like 2 pages of this and a page of that. I've got a lot of notes to get through, and I want to talk about End of Evangelion, so I'm probably going to have a table of contents for this video because there's going to be so much to talk about, and I've got to break it down. So first of all, before we go any further, to answer anybody's questions about End of Evangelion, when I'm done, I'm going to watch episodes 25 and 26 week to week as per normal, but I'll probably have a post on YouTube and a post on Patreon out about it. I know the End of Evangelion is a big movie. I don't know anything about it, but I know it's big, and everybody's been warning me about it since the start of this series and how dense it's going to be, and I was like, okay. Someone on Patreon was like, you spent 3 hours dissecting episode 24. You're probably going to spend like 7 hours on End of Evangelion. And that hit me all at once. I was like, oh my God, what if it does? So I was like, ah! So to prepare for that, I am going to record some like one-shot manga things I've wanted to review for a while that have to do with Chainsaw Man that's coming out in October. I've got some things I wanted to record anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and record those. And then just a heads up, after episode 26, because I'll probably be watching End of Evangelion before episode 26 comes out, there probably will be some breaks in between episode 26, End of Evangelion, and all of the Rebuild movies. There will likely be some breaks because I'll probably have to maybe do multiple recording sessions to get all the analysis in. I want to make sure that those analyses of the movies are good as I can make them. And so there may be some breaks where we don't have Neon Genesis on, Thursdays, but there will be something else there. So you will get some content. It just may not be Neon Genesis for that week. And then it may be like the week after. It may be 2 weeks. I don't think it'll be 2 weeks. I think it'll be like a week in between. But I have some stuff planned to help kind of fill that void, including possibly me playing through a dating simulator of Neon Genesis. We'll see how that goes. Well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I had that requested in the Discord. They're like, you could play the dating sim Girlfriend of Steel 2. It has Kaoru and Shinji in it. And I was like, I've never played a dating sim before, but the first one I played, being Neon Genesis themed, seems appropriate. So we'll see how that goes. I'll have to find that and see if there's anybody that has like an English translation of that game that's available on Mac that I can play. So I'm like, that would be fun. But in any case, that's my plans. I'm going to watch End of Evangelion, and after several requests and people talking about it, I'm going to watch Death, which is the first part of Death and Rebirth. I'm going to watch that. I think I'm going to plan out a whole day, just watch Death in the morning, and then that'll be a recap. And a lot of people were like, well, Death is just a recap of the series. And I'm like, yeah, but I've had a lot of people request that I go back and rewatch the series, and I was like, my brain can't do that right now. But so Death will be a nice way of doing that. I'll be able to recap the series. I can talk my way through it and be like, oh yeah, this, and this. And we can just have fun with that. And then there's supposedly an intermission between Death and Rebirth. So I'll just stop at the intermission because Rebirth is just the first part of End of Evangelion. So I might as well watch End of Evangelion. So I'll watch Death, pause it, go eat lunch, take a breather, mentally prep myself, and then come back and watch End of Evangelion and react to that. So that is my plan. So it'll be a long reaction video. It will also probably be on Vidyard. The movies and End of Evangelion will probably be on Vidyard. So if you need to adjust your browser, you may. I don't have any trouble with Vidyard. I've had some people complain about Streamable and Vidyard not being accessible. I have no issues with either one. You don't have to create an account for Vidyard. They want you to create an account, but you don't have to. You can just exit out of that box and play the movie, and it's fine. I don't have an issue with it, but for streaming and bandwidth purposes, Streamable is good for like single episodes, but for movies, I'm much more comfortable with Vidyard because they don't have a bandwidth limit and I can put whatever I want on there. Streamable, they're going to start charging you more if you like exceed a bandwidth limit, and I don't want that to happen. So with that being said, the videos and movies will be on Vidyard, just a heads up. So with that being said, that's all my plans right now. So it's going to be a little bit, I've never had a situation reacting so far, and I've done this for like 2 years now, almost 2 years, where I've had to stop and put something in place because it's taking me a longer time to get through everything. But Neon Genesis is worth it. So hopefully you guys are on board with me taking my time with the End of Evangelion and the rebuilds. Hopefully y'all are okay with that. I hope so anyway, but that's my plan. So let's get to these comments. I've already spent 5 minutes talking about that, so this is going to be a long intro. But There surprisingly were not a whole lot of comments on episode 22. I went ahead and I did comments for episodes 22, 23, and 24, so there's a lot. But there were surprisingly not a lot of comments on episode 22 that I have not already addressed in previous videos, so that was good. So, first of all, I want to go ahead and say that it was brought to my attention that Fuyu Chan's voice actor passed. Motomu. Motomu seems like such an odd name. I guess it's like maybe, like you have old school names in the West that people don't use anymore. Motomu. I've never heard anybody called Motomu. Motomu Kiyokawa. He passed away at the age of 87. Ripe old age of 87, dude. I am so grateful that he voiced Fuyu Chan. Our sweet Fuyu Chan. So R.I.P. Motomu Kiyokawa. You were an amazing voice actor, and I'm sad to hear that you've passed. So, in other comments, we have Dacker 1000. Dacker 1000 talked about how Gendo, and that we're not really shown much of Gendo and Yui on screen together at all. We see them separately. We see them separately talking about each other, but we never really see them on screen. So I'm still waiting for that Gendo point of view episode. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I'm still waiting for it and to see if maybe him and Yui, we only get like one scene of him and Yui together, which is of him talking about Shinji and naming her. And it's not even an animated scene. It's just like a still image of her like nursing Shinji, and that's all we get. But they're together in the scene talking to each other, and that's pretty much it. But we do get the idea that Fuyu Chan did love Yui. He did love her, which is interesting, right? Andres Yanez talked about how Masato is not a good mother or guardian, and in episode 24 admits her failure. I feel for Masato because she's got a lot going on. She intended well. A lot of this series are adults that mean well. They just don't do well. They have good intentions, but those intentions kind of fall through and they don't ever see fruition. Like for Masato, she wanted to give Shinji a home so he wasn't alone. She wanted to take in Asuka because she knew her backstory and wanted to provide her with some sense of company. But Masato, because she can't connect to Shinji or Asuka, she's kind of unable to fulfill that guardian maternal role that she kind of gives herself. And so, yeah, she is kind of a failure in that regard. I love Masato. She's one of my favorite characters in the show, but she's very flawed. And it becomes more and more apparent as the show goes on where her shortcomings are. So I thought that was good to bring up. Jimmy Russell has two interesting theories here that I'm kind of not for, and that's fine. Like, the thing about Neon Genesis is that there's so much that's abstract and left to audience interpretation that we can debate back and forth whether or not certain situations are true or not, and I don't think anybody's necessarily wrong until Anno tells us we're wrong. So until Anno gives us like full clairvoyance and like, oh yeah, here's the clarity of the situation, we can speculate and debate as much as we want. But Jimmy Russell was talking about how there's a theory that in episode 15, Asuka and Shinji had sex. I'm not for it. I don't believe it. And so I think that they wanted to have sex and they may have gotten close to having it. But going into episode 24 and throughout episode 24, I like to imagine that Shinji and Kaoru, they're kind of two sides of the same coin sort of situation, especially in terms of their father figure. And so I like to imagine that both Kaoru and Shinji are kind of like pure in the sense of they're both virgins, neither of them have sex. I mean, you could argue that when Shinji's talking to Masato, he's like, oh, well, Kaoru is better than I am. I could see somebody in the comments being like, well, he said that because he's had sex and he's not pure like Kaoru. And I'm like, you could see that, but I feel like Shinji, even though him and Asuka have kind of like a tense relationship after episode 15, I think it would be even more exacerbated, or we would have something more with Shinji if it were the case. I don't think they had sex. I don't. I think that he wanted to. I think he did want to have sex with Asuka, and that's kind of where that whole do you love me and like all that comes into play, but I don't think he actually went through with it. No, I don't think so. And so that kind of ties into the other theory that Jimmy Russell had about some people think that Masato had tried to have sex with Shinji. And I'm like, no, we talked about this in the Discord. I'm like, no, I don't think she tried to have sex with Shinji. I think people are just like pushing that agenda. I'm like, no, I think Masato was trying to comfort Shinji, but Shinji, the whole hedgehog's dilemma, because he's like, no, I don't know how to react or how to accept this comfort. He's like, no, get away from me. I don't think that she tried to have sex with him. I don't. That's my personal theory. Y'all can argue with me to the ends of the earth. You're not going to change my mind. So I don't think she did. That's a cool theory. If you believe that, go for it. But as much sex and sexual references are in this show and that are so blatant, you would think that they gave us so much blatant sexual references. If it was true of Shinji, they'd give us a little bit more that was obvious. They don't. So I think you can think that, but I'm not on that bandwagon. So y'all believe what you want. I'm not going to judge you, but I'm not for those theories. And so in episode 16, I did like Jimmy Russell pointing out that Shinji and the others are constantly on the train in those flashbacks. Like we get into Shinji's head and he's on the train with Rei and Toji. Where's Asuka? Not on the train. She's at the station. So there's that divide. She can't get with the others. I love that visual imagery and symbolism. That's really cool. Alexander Q talks about how in talking about Kaji, he's not really the player that we thought he was. It was Gendo that's the player. And I'm like, that's the most baffling thing about this show is that Gendo has game. That's like the best thing about it. But it is interesting that Kaji is portrayed from the start as this womanizer and this schmoozer that's a ladies' man. But in reality, I mean, Kaji flirts with women, but the only women he ever like actually has action with that we know of is Masato. And that's the woman that he loves. And so it surprisingly subverts that expectation with Kaji. And then you have Gendo, who you think is like socially inept. And he's had sex with like 3 women that we know of right off the bat. And it's like, wait, what? So I thought that was really interesting to bring up, that it kind of plays with that trope of the playboy and kind of turns it on its head. And it's like, Gendo's the playboy. My mind is blown, right? So Nick B and Alex Cornejo talked about how the elevator ride back from Terminal Dogma after episode 23 would probably be really awkward. And Alex Cornejo kind of talked about how, yeah, the whole setup of Tokyo 3 is bizarre. It's insanity because, and I'm going to phrase this the way you said it, Alex, you take a ferry underground, you have a geofront where you enter the pyramid, you take an escalator down to Central Dogma, you descend several layers in an elevator. Then at Terminal Dogma, at the bottom, there's a subterranean layer with a lake and a ship. Not to be confused with the lake and ship 1,000 feet above. It's just insanity. I was like, just thinking about the geography of it, I was like, none of this makes sense. And it's wonderful. I love it. Speaking of which, it's just layers upon layers of insanity. Speaking upon which, Alex Cornejo talks about how the kids in the series mirror the adults, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, which I love. I love that it's not a direct parallel or comparison or contrast between one character and another. There are elements of the adults and elements of the kids that overlap and parallel, and I think that's really cool. So some examples that Alex gave was like Asuka. Asuka is outwardly sexual, like Masato, but she is resentful of her mother and motherhood, like Ritsuko. Then you have Rei, who is reserved and rational, like Ritsuko, but she has this initial quiet quality that Masato had when she was younger because of her trauma, but then Masato ended up opening up. So will Rei end up becoming a chatterbox? Don't know. And then Shinji has the ambivalence towards his father like Masato does, but I like the way Alex phrases, has the male domesticity of Kaji. And I'm like, I like that a lot. So yeah, they're all just amalgamations of each other put forth in the series. And I really like the way Anno does that because it's very true to life, right? You're not just exactly like one other person. You have shades of multiple people that you interact with over the course of your life. And that's really cool. The angel in episode 23 tried to take over Rei, but here's the thing, and I like the way that Alex phrases Rei. When the angel tried to take over Shinji and Asuka, it succeeded in definitely like giving them a mind fuck, basically. But with Rei emerges kind of the least negative out of this situation. The funny thing is, we'll get to the point of that, is that Rei in this, she knows what loneliness is. She's self-aware of herself. She knows who she is. And she, therefore, when the angel tries to like make her doubt that, she's like, no, I am who I am. I know what loneliness is. Who are you? And so it kind of like spins it upon the angel. So the funny thing is in all of this, she emerges much more stronger as a character after the angel encounter than Shinji and Asuka. But she immediately dies afterwards because she sacrifices herself to save everybody. So it's ironic kind of that she is the one that survives the angel attack in the best place, and then she dies. So what do we do about that? So EQ talked about how Shinji sits in the same position in his Eva as he does sleeping. I thought that was really interesting. He sleeps in the same position that he sits inside of his Eva. That was a really cool observation. I liked that. And then Ray. The first three letters of the Ray are the first three letters of reincarnation. I was like, I nearly spit my drink out. I was like, bleh. I was like, yep, nope. Good on you, Anno. Look at you. And that her resentment of Gendo, Ray 3's resentment, could be likened to being forced to come back post-sacrifice. I'm like, yeah, the fact that this is the third time Ray has come back, and Ray may not have really realized the first time she came back what was happening, but this is the third version of herself, and she's like, I sacrificed myself, and you brought me back. Okay. So I feel like there's, at the end of episode 24, Ray is standing next to Gendo, and seems like they're on equal terms and good terms, but I feel like there's an aspect of Ray 3 that does not like Gendo and is resentful of him, and so I'm curious to see where that goes. Like, what do we do with that? So that was interesting. Jack Kim commented about how Armisael, the angel that Ray encounters, is, well, we'll talk about what Armisael is, but upon learning the concept of loneliness, could possibly have been thinking about the other fallen angels, and that leads to the Tower of Angels that burst out of Ray. It's like the angels trying to reconstruct all the angels that, the fallen angels, and that's what that tower represents. I thought that was a really cool concept. I liked that. Bright Girl talks about how the Chamber of Guff is a term from Jewish mysticism that refers to the place where souls are held before the bodies they're going to belong to are born. That's such a weird concept. I never thought of that concept, and I'm not Jewish, so I don't know anything about like the religious concepts behind it. But that's an interesting thing, that you have a place where souls are until they're ready to go into their bodies. That's so cool. And that kind of, I think, is perfect for this series, because we have a lot of talk about how souls are like repositioned or transferred or put into different things. So that makes a lot of sense why the Chamber of Guff would be a term that Anna would incorporate into the show. Music Too Loud W talks about how Hikari's words, and Chiropats talked about this too on Patreon, so I give you both credit for this. The Hikari's words of "you did your best," they had good intentions, but they probably had a more negative effect with Asuka. And I like the way that Music Too Loud phrased this, in that it just, you did your best means that the best Asuka could do was fail. And that's not what Asuka wanted to hear. So I thought that was a really cool thing that both of you pointed out, because yeah, it's just like with Kaji, just like with Masato, and now just like with Hikari, they try to comfort and say words that will be good for this situation, and it just backfires on them tremendously. You know. So then we have Luim ML3 talked about how Armisael, this was the other comment about Armisael, is the angel of childbirth. And that kind of ties to in episode 23, the imagery of Ray absorbing the angel and having where she looks like her Eva unit looks like it's pregnant, right? There's a lot of womb imagery in episode 23. But also it makes sense that since Ray, as this individual pointed out, that since Ray is likely a clone, she's probably sterile. Again, tying back to that the woman who never bleeds sort of thing. And that her animosity towards Gendo and feelings towards Shinji are connected maybe to... I thought it was interesting that in the last episode 24, my notes, what they're getting to, is that in episode 24, when Ray is standing above Kaoru and Kaoru's about to die, Kaoru smiles like he knows what she's thinking. She looks like she hates Kaoru. And if in episode 23 she realized that she likes Shinji, then Kaoru is a direct threat to that. So maybe her animosity towards Kaoru is tied to the fact that she does like Shinji. So who knows? Betel Sign also talked about how after episode 26, I need to watch the end credits of the dub of episode 26 to hear Shinji's commentary. And supposedly it's like a minute long. So I've made a note. So I'm going to try to remember that at the end of next week's episode to watch those end credits with Shinji's. Apparently it's on YouTube, to watch those end credits in English of what Shinji's voice actor says. Might be fun. Might be a fun time. Might be a fun little way to round out this good little series, right? So now we're getting into the other comments, and I know I've talked for nearly 20 minutes, but like I said, I'm going to have a table of contents for this episode, probably. Lyndon Price talked about how Pin went to stay with the Hokari family, which is Hikari's family. So I was like, okay, he went to stay with the class rep. Pin's in good hands. Good to know. Chris M. talked about how Seal didn't necessarily want Tokyo 3 destroyed. It's a rough translation. And I was like, oh, good, because that's one thing I've been afraid of watching any series in Japanese is that when the English translations come out, if something is lost in that translation. And so Chris M. pointed out that they were mainly saying that the destruction of Tokyo 3 when Rei blew up was only to their benefit. Like, they could use that to their benefit. They don't necessarily want to destroy Tokyo 3, but the fact that Rei's kind of demolished it kind of works to their benefit. And I thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Bright Girl, I'm just going to pull up her whole comment because her whole comment with episode 24 is chef's kiss. And I try to find a way to paraphrase it. There's no good way to paraphrase it. So I'm going to just read her whole comment because it's wonderful. So Bright Girl's talked about in previous episodes the comparison of Shinji to Jonah, the biblical story of Jonah and the whale. So this kind of starts off kind of branching off from that. If you want to keep going with the Jonah and Shinji thing and see where Kaoru fits into that interpretation, I think he would be the vine that protects Jonah from the sun near the end of the story. God asks Jonah why he's so concerned about the vine, even though it grew up overnight and died overnight. So Kaoru showing up and then instantly going away. You could ask the same question to Shinji about Kaoru, and the answer would be the same, because he was the only thing that protected him from the brutal environment he was in. Now this part I love. When asked in an interview why Kaoru couldn't be a girl, Ano said, because it's a young man. There is no feminine sense whatsoever, right? Because it's Shinji and another Shinji. Since it's an ideal Shinji that's appearing, it can't be a girl. This is an idea from Greek philosophy that our world is actually just the shadow of the perfect world, and that we are all imperfect versions of what we could ideally be. So it seems that Kaoru exhibits traits that Shinji wished he had, or could ideally have if he didn't have such a messed up life. Confidence, charisma, freedom from anxiety, and so on. I friggin' love that. I'm like, yes. One, Ano admitting like, no, it's not a girl. It's just another form of Shinji. Like, they love each other. What's wrong with that? So it's kind of like talking about self-love in a sense too, which is fun, but I also like the idea that this world is like a shadow of a perfect world. Every sense of the word, like nerve, everything, like this world is like, if you could have an ideal world, what would be the opposite of it? And it's the world of Neon Genesis. So I really like that part of the comment. And then finally, I mentioned in the Discord that Kaoru was ranked as the second favorite character in a popularity poll, behind Asuka. In the same poll, he was also ranked as the second favorite angel. He lost to our best girl, Ramiel! Yes! Kaoru's voice actor, Akira Ishida, made this very Kaoru-esque statement about the results of the poll. Naga said Kaoru himself, he wouldn't pay attention to something as trivial as rankings. Do you think that from his standpoint, it would be enough to just support Shinji, to be able to gently embrace him at all times? The kind of monster who embodies unconditional love without even a fragment of selfishness. No matter how much they may look like an ordinary human, they're no human at all. They can never be anything but an angel. Oh, yes! So I love that comment so freaking much. It's great. And so all of those things that are involved with it, Bright Girl, I was like, yep, I was just nodding my head the whole time reading it. So thank you for that. Akira talks about how Akira, if you get a chance to go to episode 24, find the commenter Akira and look at his comment because he breaks it down they break it down in a very big detail. But the title, The Final Messenger, is written in kanji or kana characters. So it also looks like Nagisa. So basically Kaoru's family name. And Kaoru is a one-letter shift from the word end. And I was like, So it's funny that the title of the episode is also the name of Nagisa. It's great. So let me see. I'm trying to think of what I think. Japanese kana characters are written in a specific order with 5 letters and then a vowel are followed by a consonant vowel combination ending in an n sound. Basically, it breaks it down more, but Kaoru's name corresponds with the episode title. So if you get a chance to go to that comment, my notes are awful, so go look at that comment by Akira. It breaks down everything. It's really interesting. And I like that Alex Cornejo in the replies was like, basically you have to be a cunning linguist to totally get the full scope of Neon Genesis. That's one thing I like about Neon Genesis is that there's so many layers and elements to it. It plays to like, are you a linguist? Do you know Greek mythology? Do you know biblical stories? Do you know all of this? Like, and if you do, you'll get the full context. But if not, there's going to be little bits and chunks you might miss. And I'm like, so it's fun times. Simon Lemon noted that with Asuka in the tub, And Danielle Contreras kind of commented about this too, that with Asuka in the tub, there's this concept of barefoot suicide in Japan, where you take off your shoes so that you don't bring dirt into the afterlife. And the minute they said that, I was like, oh, well, that ties to when Asuka saw her mother hanging in episode 24. When she saw that, the mother, if you look, the mother didn't have socks or shoes on. It was just her bare feet. So she did the same thing. And so Asuka sitting in the tub, she has her clothes folded all nice and neat, but she's in the tub like she's committing suicide. And I hadn't noticed this, but Daniel Contreras pointed out that if you look back in the episode, it could be rust, but it could also be that she cut herself and was bleeding into the tub. Like she was trying to commit suicide when she was found. And I'm like, that's awful. So Asuka at the worst place right now in the series. I believe she's at the worst place. Right? Which when we went back to that whole, that theory about how the attachment theory, she's the worst of the worst. She's a negative view of herself, a negative view of others, right? So she's in the worst place. Alex Cornejo commented how Kaoru was in the OP the whole time, sandwiched between the AT field and the moon. How fitting! He was there the whole time and I didn't even notice. I did notice though that when I've gone back and rewatched episode 24, which I've done quite a bit for reasons, I think it's just a subconscious thing. Once your brain knows that it's there, you pick up on it. But now that I know that, once I read that comment, I went back and watched the OP and it's right there. My brain was like, boop, there it is. And I'm like, how did I miss that this entire time? It's fun times. Also, Feliz Jueves, which means Happy Thursday, was a meme that was supposedly created from that little image of Asuka running towards her mother in episode 24. People took that image of Asuka running and just made a meme out of it where they put happy sayings around that. Only this fandom. Only this fandom would get away with that. But I really loved this concept. Fly Me to the Moon, that song that's been playing the entire time, it has seemed up until episode 24 like it was Kaji and Masato's song. Like it was their song. It was referring to them. Maybe it referred to Rei. But after episode 24, we know that it's actually Kaoru and Shinji's song. And I was like, oh, because Asuka sought to impress Shinji. Masato cried for Shinji. Rei died for Shinji. But the only one who actually has come out and outright said, I love you, has been Kaoru. And the lyrics to the song, in other words, I love you. Like all these other things the song talks about, like all these different ways you can say it, but in other words, I love you. Like they actually come out and say those 3 words. Kaoru's been the only one to do it. And so I thought that was so cool. And then we have back in episode 4, Shinji is dead-eyed and walking around trying to process the trauma from being in the Eva during the Hedgehog's Dilemma. And when he sees the couple in the movie theater, his eyes start to water. And as Alex Cornejo says, it's from a lack of attention. And then he's carried it with him throughout the entire show that Shinji has had this post-traumatic stress, but in that moment in the theater, the lack of affection he's had overrides that stress. And that's just how much Shinji is desperate and starving for affection. And Kaoru gave it to him in the last episode, and Shinji had to kill him. So, fun times, right? I also loved how Alex Cornejo ended his comment. He was like, biblical spoilers. And this phrase I feel like is going to tie to the rest of the series. Biblical spoilers. Just like Jesus, Kaoru enters late into the story. He's there briefly, and things get weird once he is gone. And I was like, so I don't consider that a spoiler, but I'm like, well, things are about to get weird. Good to know. Which honestly they are. There's so many loose ends to this story, and we have 2 episodes to kind of wrap things up, and then end of Evangelion and the movies. But I'm like, things are going to get weird, which the rebuild movies are like a secondary canon, so I'm going to put those over there. So we really have these 2 episodes and end of Evangelion to tie up the main story. Yeah, things getting weird. This series, what? No. And Christopher Peterson talked about how the second coming of Christ does signal the end of the world, so maybe Kaoru is connected more to Jesus than the Antichrist. Although that's the second coming, so I feel like there's a lot of crossover there. Like you can kind of mix and match the Christ Antichrist tropes with Kaoru, but I feel like Kaoru leans more towards gay space Jesus, as the Discord has dubbed him, and I love it. So, Bride Girl with episode 24. We were talking in the Discord, and so I kind of wrote this out to the side. But it's like Kaoru shows up at the very end of the story, makes the main character realize their bisexuality, and then refuses to elaborate and dies. Absolute Chad. It's like, Kaoru really is. I I also like that Bright Girl pointed out that water is a Freudian psychoanalysis that is tied to the womb and the desire to return to it, which could connect to Nagisa's returning to Adam. I thought that was very fitting. And then Isabel notes that Shinji listening to Ode to Joy, I felt so bad that I said Flight of the Valkyries. I was like, man, that sucks. I really don't know my classical music. Because I was like, everybody, as soon as I got in the Discord and said I watched episode 24, everybody was like, Ode to Joy. And I was like, Ode to Joy. And then I was like, oh. But if I didn't realize this upon watching or in the discussion, because I had the sound turned off when we discussed the episode, but when Shinji's waiting and Kaoru shows up in the hangar to meet with him, he's listening to his headphones. He's listening to Ode to Joy, which was the song that Kaoru was humming. And someone in the Discord was like, could you imagine Shinji went to the music store and was like, can you tell me what song is? Like he just starts humming it and the person's like, Ode to Joy? Like how he found that out, I wish we could have seen. Bright Girl notes that Kaoru's angel name is Tabris, which is the angel of free will. And he wants the freedom to die how he sees fit, which seems fine. And then Nitnal, finally, talked about how the angel of free will is very appropriate and kind of ironic because Kaoru shows up as this angel of free will amidst talks of scripts and scenarios. And that in the end, the angel betrays the script and does whatever they want. And however they want is that they want Shinji to kill him. So, fun times! That only took 30 minutes. I'm going to have a table of contents. I can already tell it's going to happen. It's going to need to happen. But there were so many awesome comments with these episodes that I'm like, I wanted to incorporate them all. And so that's where we're at. So, I'm ready to dive in, y'all. So yeah, this episode is only 23 minutes. For a director's cut, I'm like, it's fairly short. But I say that. It's like a minute longer than it usually is. I say that. So yeah, it's only 23 minutes, which is curious. Especially for the penultimate episode, I was expecting like a 30-minute thing. Maybe that's the last episode. To be honest, when I pull up these episodes, I'm only doing them one by one because I want to avoid as much spoilers as I can, and I don't even want to know the length until I pull it up, so that's where I'm at. But yeah, we'll just see what's gonna happen. So in any case, I hope y'all are ready, but sorry for that long intro, but we're gonna jump into episode 25 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, and we're gonna do it here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see y'all on the other side. I had to go pour myself another cup of coffee because I feel like I need it after this. What? I feel like episode 24 was like a big party. Episode 24 was like a rave. Gay Space Jesus came down. We were having a great time. And then at the end of the party, now we have to deal with the hangover. And that's what this episode is. It's a hangover episode. And Shinji is in the worst possible state. There's so many things that I can say about this episode that I need to before we break it down. First of all, the fact that it's a two-parter. We haven't really had a lot of big two-parters in this series. I mean, we've had cliffhangers, and we've had, you need to watch the next episode to see how it resolves. But this is a very much, it is only the midpoint of the dilemma, and we're gonna maybe resolve things in the next episode. Maybe, I don't know. This was the most bonkers penultimate episode I've ever watched for a series, because it does not do what you think it's going to do. I figured we were gonna have an aftermath with Shinji, that he was gonna be struggling. I figured we were gonna have that. And I feel like Shinji was gonna be in a dark place. I feel like we're gonna have that. But in any other shonen battle anime manga, which, here's the thing, Neon Genesis Evangelion is not a battle shonen manga and anime. No. It puts on the facade of being that. It lures you in under that false guise, and then you get into it, and it's like a psychological horror, is what this actually is. And so it subverts your expectation. I thought it was going to be like Gendo with the atom in his hand. I thought Gendo was going to turn into this giant monster, and Shinji was going to have to deal with the ramifications of, I'm going to have to kill my father on top of the person I just loved back to back. Maybe he still is going to kill Gendo in the next episode. I don't know. But you think that it's going to be this big battle episode, and usually the penultimate episode before the end of a series is when everything goes down. Usually everything goes down in that penultimate episode, and then the final episode you get your like climax and resolution. I don't know what the climax and resolution of this series is going to be. I guess End of Evangelion might answer that question and solve that problem, but at least the only comfort is at least those of you that had this on VHS, you had this episode and 26 back to back, so you wouldn't have to wait a week. You could just watch them back to back. Easy peasy. But this episode is so bizarre. So not only is it a two-parter, not only does it completely subvert every expectation of a penultimate episode that you think you're going to have, it is a giant introspection and reflection on the mentality of all of the major players in our series. Pardon my language, but what the fuck? Why do we have a shot of Ritsuko and Masato just shot and dead with no explanation? Excuse me, Ano? Excuse me? There better be an explanation in the next episode. We better be, it feels like we're backtracking this episode to get to it. We just hadn't got to it. But if you don't explain who shot Kaji, who shot Masato, and who shot Ritsuko, I'm gonna lose my mind. And I don't want spoilers, but if Ano's like, oh, you're just up to your interpretation, we're going to have words. But I was like, you can't just give us that imagery and then backtrack. So this episode is a big mind trip of it's all about reality, and we'll talk all about it. There's so much symbolism and things and imagery, but it's all about what is reality and where are these characters. That's going to be Whiteboard Kun was necessary at this point, but so there's all these questions that this episode is exploring that we're going to break down. But the funny thing is that most of this episode is so minimalist. There's a lot of reused animation, which we've talked about this with previous episodes. It's cleverly done because it's not just a way for them to save on the budget, because we've talked about this whole series about how deadlines were not being met. There's a lot of budget concerns. Things were just getting shut out at the last minute, and Ano's like, just make it work. And so you could tell at this point that the budget thing kind of comes to play when there's a lot of imagery that's reused. But the clever thing this show does is, because it is a show that is dealing with psychological issues and memory and how we process images that we see in our lives, that because it's a show dealing with that psychological aspect, you can almost justify those images being reused and repeated because it's part of the story. So it's clever that Ano does that. For the record, I'm gonna say Ano was not in a great place when this episode came out. I was like, oh shit. There is some darkness in this episode that I'm like, Ano, I'm hoping that you got some help. And I think that he did, obviously, because he's still around. But I'm like, Ano, you were in a very, very bad place at this point in the series, because I'm a pretty big optimist, and at some point in the series, like, I started to like curl into myself and be like, no, like starting to say, like, don't think like that, Shinji. But there's all these questions of is Shinji's being manipulated? What are his actual thoughts? This whole episode, I'm just like, we need to break it down, because I had to pour that other cup of coffee. I'm like, this is gonna be a thing. So. But God, we finally get introspection again on Shinji, like we do with Asuka and Rei. We get all of them. We get everybody. We get Masato. We get Shinji. We don't really get Ritsuko so much, but I feel like we've gotten into Ritsuko's character a bit before. Maybe in episode 26 we'll get more into her. Gendo's plan comes out, surprising no one. It's a very nihilistic plan, very much. We'll talk about it. I'm like, wow, Gendo, I'm not surprised that this is your plan, but the fudge. Okay, we'll talk about it. And I'm floored. I'm honestly floored that this was episode 25. Okay, so they give you this OP to be like, I'm curious, because this episode really isn't, for being the director's cut, it's not exceedingly long, and I'm curious to know what the difference was between this and the original, and I know you all will tell me in the comments, so there is that. A world that's ending, and do you love me? The big questions moving forward, right? And we have this, I'm looking at the OP to see about any images that we have left over that I might not have noticed. And we do see like the little ball that's like the soul. It's almost like a red moon, like a red marble, right? And then the terror field, exactly. We have Tokyo 3. We have shots of Rei and everybody, Adam, Gendo, the Eva units, and then Masato. God, Masato. And then, okay, And go, young boy, become a legend. And the thing is, Shinji doesn't want to become a legend. That's the thing. So, man, I could see... I remember when I started this series, a lot of people said that viewers were very frustrated with episodes 25 and 26. And I don't want spoilers. 26, I have a feeling, if we've got End of Evangelion to wrap things up, I have a feeling that episode 26 is going to end, like, in a bizarre place. It just feels like it. From this episode, I was like, oh, we're going to end in a weird place, aren't we? That seems fitting. But I feel like when people were talking about how the fandom was very thrown off by this episode, yeah, because you're expecting there to be, you're expecting aftermath with Shinji, but you're expecting like this big battle, like some resolution. This episode gives you none of that. It just gives you explanation and introspection and reflection into these characters. And then this whole human instrumentality project kind of comes to light that we've been hinting at this entire time. There's a random shot of Masato and Ritsuko dead. We don't get any explanation for that. So this episode is incredibly frustrating. And I can see why people would be like, what the fudge, Anno, is happening? And Anno's like, maybe you'll find out next episode, maybe not. I'm like, ah! So, yeah, So, yeah, but a lot of this episode is just text on a screen. And I could see if you are not the type of person that you're like, I want to see visually what is happening, then I could see that being very frustrating to you because you're like, what is this? It's very reminiscent of episode 14. It's very reminiscent of, there's another episode that deals with a lot of screen things. I think of oral story, or the oral stage, like weaving a story. I think of Weaving a Story parts 1 and 2, because in those parts, there's a lot of text on screen. And I can see people being frustrated by that. So, we tie our characters and everything with them together, right? So I'm going to pick out my colors here of what we're doing. Why not? And just go from there. I like making Gendo green because the G's go together. So we're going to have, I'm going to put Shinji in light blue. Put Shinji here. You know what? We're going to go up further. I feel like we're going to use a lot of whiteboard Kun in this. So we have Shinji up here. We have all of our major players. Shinji up here. We're going to put Shinji there. And then we're going to have Asuka. We're going to have Asuka here because she's our major player. It's the way they describe it as case files. It feels like an interrogation. Like it feels like they're doing like the after, like an autopsy, like an after case. I'm like, if all these characters die, oh no, why are you doing this? And we're gonna put Rei. We're gonna put Rei here because she's there as well. And then we're gonna put Masato over here. All right, we're gonna put Masato. They're our main players in all of this. And then we're gonna put Gendo over here because he's the man with the plan, right? Okay, so we got that to go through. So the very first person that we get in all this is Shinji, and it says the reason for existing, raison d'etre, which I cannot pronounce French to save my life. So there's that. So reason for existing. Those of you that are French, I apologize for the massacre of your language that you just experienced. So reason for existing. All right, everybody is searching for that purpose. And so the reason why one is allowed to be here. Okay, that makes sense in the case of Shinji Ikari. And so we see him holding Kaoru in front of Adam with that smile. Yep, get that in there. The boy wished for death of his own will. So we have the idea that Kaoru wished for death. Okay. That was established in the last episode. And Shinji being very upset about it. So Shinji, okay, so here's the thing. One big thing about this episode is trying to figure out where are these characters. We know that Asuka is inside the O2 unit. So she is in the O2 unit. We get that established. That throughout this episode, she figures out she's in the O2 unit. But she feels like she's been, I'm going to put on there, placed in the O2 unit. She's been like forced to be there. She's like, why am I here? I didn't choose to come here. It's like they literally took her out of the hospital bed and put her in the O2 unit for this instrumentality project. And I'm going to put down here with Gendo, the human instrumentality project. So the question is Shinji and Rei inside of their EVA units throughout this entire episode? I think that Shinji is. So I'm going to put down here, is he in the O1 unit? Question mark. Right? And so then with Rei, the question is she in the OO unit? Question mark. And then with Masato, she's dead? Dead? Where now? Ritsuko is in the LCL fluid, so there's that. I don't know. Like, she was killed apparently, and there went my marker for Masato. So Ritsuko's wherever. But yeah, so as far as we know, Shinji could be in the O1 unit throughout this entire conversation. And so then we get the idea that Shinji killed him. He granted his wish, is how they phrase it. Like, okay. And Shinji's really torn up about it. The final angel is gone. And we have the head. There's a lot of decapitation in this series. And I'm just going to make note that there is a parallel of Rei and Kaoru. Like, all of the Reis in the tanks, when Ritsuko presses the button, all the Reis in the tanks blow up and their heads get popped off. Very similarly to how Kaoru's does. So lots of angels losing their heads. Mm-hmm. But Shinji Ikari is tormented. Yeah, a bit. Why did you kill him? So these questions that surface for Shinji, we'll put here. Why did you kill him? That's the big thing. Why'd you do it? Almost like he's getting interrogated. And we see the blood getting washed off of his hands. It's getting asked again. And Shinji is just tormented, terrified. Because, yeah, the one person you loved, you killed. Why did you kill him? And, oh, God, I'm going to take lots of screenshots, I'm sure. Because the animation we do get in this episode, there is some really good ones. But, yeah, Shinji with his head in his hands. Getting asked this question over and over again. And the image of him in the chair. The image of him in the chair. I feel like, I think in the Discord it was shared at one point. There was like a figurine that was shared and it shows Shinji in the chair. I'm assuming this is an iconic image because everybody's in this chair at this point. It's like, yeah. But Shinji in the chair. I'm going to put Shinji in the chair. You know what this entire thing feels like? And I'm going to kind of put it down here at the very bottom. It feels like it's a one-act play. If you've ever been in theater, I did some theater in high school and college, but it is a one-act play. And what I mean by that is usually like a one-act play, it's very minimalist. There's only a few players in it. There's like one set. There's not a lot of stage business. There's not a lot of props and things moving around. It's usually like very minimal. So the chair in the middle of the stage is very typical of a one-act play. And it's just these characters doing a very simple plot. But a lot of times the characters, they don't really, I mean, they can interact with each other, but a lot of it is like monologues and characters like doing solo things, which kind of fits Neon Genesis because we have this ensemble cast, but a lot of the cast have their own individual episodes and individual scenes. It's funny, for all the conversations these characters have with one another, there really is not a lot of camaraderie in Neon Genesis. There's really not. It's a lot of individuals doing things on their own in the space of other people, which is kind of the point. They don't really know how to communicate with one another and interact with one another despite being there together. So it feels like a one-act play. And there's the chair on the stage. And then there's the famous line of Shakespeare that is, all the world's a stage. Everything. And that it kind of ties to this idea that reality is an act or a series of actions. It's all a series of actions that we propose and that we purport over and over again. So reality is just what we make of it. And so I love that the idea that this entire episode is taking place on a mental stage in Shinji's mind. It's all an act. It's all like what's happening inside of his head is all just like a mental representation of this play. There's a lot of stuff going on with it, and we'll talk about it as we go. But yeah, but poor Shinji, he is there, he's in the chair. I like under Shinji is this a conglomeration of red and purple. It's a red and purple conglomeration, which kind of ties to his Eva unit and like blood. And then we get to Asuka, it's this big orange like moon. And then we get to Rei, it's the white moon, which ties to the angels, all of that. It's all the color choices are quite symbolic, right? Why did you kill him? And he says, because I had no choice. So the answers to this question that Shinji gives is, I had no choice. Which on the surface is a lie, because he did have a choice. He could have not killed them. But he did choose to. So that's kind of a lie. And so they ask again, why'd you kill him? And he's like, it's because Kaoru was an angel. And so then the second answer is because Kaoru was an angel. He was the enemy of man and a threat. So that's a reason that he gives. And they say, even though he was also human. So this is a big thing. So they say, even though he was also human. So this is a big thing too, because it's like, well, was he? Was he human? He said he was an angel. So there is a question in Shinji's mind of, was he totally an angel or was part of him a human? Because he compares himself to Rei. Rei seems like a conglomeration of maybe an angel and human. So Shinji is wondering, like, in his mind, what if what I killed wasn't entirely an angel? What if it was part human? Then I'm kind of a big hypocrite because I've been saying I don't want to take any human lives. I made that whole thing with Toji a thing. So there's that weighing on his mind of, am I being a big hypocrite? And he says, no, an angel. He was our enemy. And they tell him, even though he was also human like you. So there's that concept of, he was the enemy, but was he truly different than you? Because what Shinji tries to justify is that I had no choice. I had to kill him because he was different. He was an enemy. He was evil. He was what needed to be done to save humanity. And in his mind, there's the question of, well, was he though? Was he really different? It's that concept of in war, when you're fighting another side, they're just the same as you. They're fighting you for the same reasons. So does that make you, are you better than them? And the answer is no. And Shinji's grappling with that. He's like, I killed this person. I took this life. And I'm trying to justify it, but is it really justifiable? And Shinji's racking his brain around it, right? And he keeps saying, you're wrong. And trying to argue with it. And that's when Rei appears. And she says, even though he was a person just like me. And so Rei, because in the last episode, I got Huckleberry too. Sorry, buddy. So Rei says that, Kaoru was like us. And she says me, but, which is true. So Rei is saying, it's kind of a double meaning there, because Shinji now knows that Rei is not entirely human. She's a clone. So Shinji is kind of grappling with, I want to get a picture of that image of her and him. And God, the little tiny animations of him like shaking his head at her is really, really good. Like he just shakes his head and it's the tiniest little animation, but it's really good. And so, but Rei is saying like, Kaoru was like me. He wasn't entirely human. She's suggesting, and this is all happening in Shinji's head, right? I want to make note of that. This is all in Shinji's head. All in Shinji's head for the most part. Until it's going to get weird. It's all in Shinji's head. And so he knows that there's something else to Rei, that she's not entirely human. She's a clone. She's possibly part angel. So when she says Kaoru was like me, Shinji knows that, and she's like, well, could you kill me just like you killed Kaoru? And he's trying to be like, no, I don't want to do that. And so Shinji is just having a very, very bad day. He is psychologically traumatized by killing Kaoru. And she says, is that why you killed him? And he says, that's right. If I hadn't, we would have died. Which is true. Shinji says that we would have died. He says he was a threat. We would have died. He's like, if I didn't kill him, all of mankind would have died. Which is true. So he's not wrong there, right? I like the cherry sitting in his blue, kind of tied to his suit and to the OO unit. Everyone would have been killed. And she's like, that's why you did it then. He's like, I didn't do it because I wanted to. So this is going to all tie back at the end with Gendo and the human instrumentality thing, is that Shinji did not want to kill him, but did it to save everyone else. So it's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing is that you feel for Shinji because he didn't want to kill Kaoru because he loved him. But then there's like another side to it that's like, well, if Shinji hadn't done that, he'd have been selfish. And it's this whole thing that got brought up with Toji. Everybody in the comments was like, there was this big debate in the comments, and it was great. But with the whole Toji thing and being the fourth child and the 13th angel, there was this whole thing where everybody was like, well, Shinji had to kill Toji. He had to attack Toji, or everyone else would have died. It's the same thing here. Back then, Shinji hesitated, and he didn't do it because he was being selfish, and he didn't want to kill Toji. And it's like, there's a part of you that's like, yeah, you're being selfish, and you should maybe think of the needs of the many over the needs of the few. But on the other hand, it's like your own personal psychological well-being, you kind of need to follow your heart and do things kind of for you too. So it's this very big dilemma. It's the trolley problem. And here we see that brought up all over again, except now Shinji did do what many in the comments were like, well, the needs of the many. Shinji did that. He did that for the needs of the many. He killed Kaoru to save humanity. But now he is tormented because of that decision. He's like, well, now I did save humanity, but what about myself? Now I'm racked with guilt. I'm racked with pain. I hate myself because of it. I didn't want to do this, but I did it to save everybody. That's the thing. He didn't want to do this, but he did it for the sake of everyone else. He's like, I had no choice. That's why you killed him. And he just asks for help. He's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, help me. He's like, help me get through this. And that's the hardest part, is that line of help me, no one helps him. No one comes to help him. And they keep saying, that's why you killed him. And he's like, help me. And it just keeps getting repeated over and over again. And he's like, someone help me. And it's that line that ties to Asuka, the whole thing of someone look at me. That's the whole thing with Asuka, is the line of someone look at me. Like, I need help. Gendo, you don't have to conglomerate all the souls of the world into nothingness. You don't have to do that. All you need to do is hire a couple therapists on staff, and we can solve this whole problem. We just need we need a therapy budget. You've got this budget from the military. Just transfer some of them funds over to a grant. Get some therapists on staff. We could solve this whole problem. Like, we really could. We don't have to destroy the world, Gendo. Gendo, this could all be avoided, my dear. Just hire like a full dozen therapists. We got this. We're going to need a dozen therapists, but problems could have been averted. And he says, someone please help me. And I want to go back to that imagery where he says someone to help me. And there's a bunch of images that flash, and most of them are of Kaoru and him, and of all his images of Kaoru and him, and Kaoru looking at him, and it's just the events mainly of the last episode, and him screaming. Ugh. And we cut back to the beach. So Shinji is like, someone help me. He's like, I can't process this. I mentally need some help. I need some therapy. And it's not there. He goes back instead to the scene with Masato and him on the beach. And I do want to make note, even though we've talked about this last ending conversation here, I do want to make note that there is like the light on the water, and the blue light on the water kind of seems like the light from the OP, the light that is, you could say it's his mom that's shining on the water. You could see that. And so we go back to the conversation of only those who have the will to live get to survive, which we talked about the last episode is not necessarily true, that he wished to die. That Kaoru abandoned his will to live, and that's why he didn't make it. You did nothing wrong, Shinji. And so Shinji goes to this like weird warped perspective of himself, which is really cool. I love the animation of this, where he's like, is that true? Did I do nothing wrong? Or are you just trying to appease me, you know? There's that question. Like, did he do nothing wrong? He's like, I don't know. And so there's this idea of uncertainty. So Shinji is feeling uncertainty. Like, did I really do anything wrong? And I love that it just becomes more distorted and warped as we go. He's like, is this really how it should be? Haunting uncertainty. I love that it's like haunting. Like, it's not just uncertainty. It's haunting uncertainty. Yeah, like he's like, is this the way that things should be? Should we really have done this? Again, not an Attack on Titan spoiler, but a lot of these concepts about survivor's guilt and did we do the right thing? Was there any other way? They're pretty big themes in that series too. I feel like, again, Isayama was just like taking notes as he went along through this series. I don't know. What should I do? And so I love that he's just like in this warped state, and like the colors of everything that's in like this celestial brain matter like pattern behind him are the colors of his EVA unit. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, he's like, what should I do? So I do think he's inside the EVA unit as he's having this processing. I do think he's inside the EVA unit as it's going on. He's like, what should I do? What should I do? Not what can I do, not what would I do, but what should I do? It goes back to this whole concept of Shinji from the very beginning of the series, where he wants someone to give him the answers. He's like asking these questions. He wants someone else to give him an answer. He's like, I don't know, so someone else pick for me. And that's part of Shinji's problem, is that he does not have the resolve or the confidence to pick an answer and have no regrets. Shinji is not living the hashtag no regrets life. He's living the hashtag regrets life now, because he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have the confidence to pick for himself. So he's back to square one, where he's like, I just need somebody to tell me what to do. Give me an answer. And nobody's offering up anything, right? And then we have him saying, what are you afraid of? That's a big question that gets asked to everyone in this episode. What are you afraid of? What is Shinji afraid of? At the end of the day, what is it? And he's like, afraid of? And they ask him again. He's like, me? So is that the answer? I'm gonna get my marker right here. Is one of the answers to that question, is Shinji afraid of himself because of what he's capable of? You know, he's supposed to be this legendary character, right? He's like, being hated. So he gives that answer, being hated. He's like, would Kaoru hate me for what I did to him? I don't know, because Kaoru wanted that. So I don't think that he would. But Shinji's afraid of that. He's like, what are you afraid of? He's like, by whom? By whom? So, yeah, they ask, what are you being hated of? Who would hate you? And I already know I'm going to have to flip Whiteboard Kun over. It's a matter of time. So he's like, who would you be hated by? And he says, by father. So that's interesting. So he says he's afraid of being hated by Gendo. I'm like, Gendo's kind of the worst. You should not care about Gendo at this point. Gendo does not care about you. I'm like, Gendo has his own agenda, but Shinji is still afraid of being hated by his father. And it shows he's like, my father abandoned me. He hated me. And it all goes back to like that psychological state of Shinji with like the shirt half off of him with the bag being deposited on the side of the road crying, where his father just abandoned him and hated him and didn't want anything to do with him. And that trauma has followed Shinji his entire life, to the point where he wants to be accepted by his father so much that he will make decisions that he doesn't want to make to try to appease that father. And it's just the most messed up thing, right? It's just so messed up that that's what's driving him. And so then I love that shot. What will I do if people hate me? That question. That's a question antagonists usually ask. I'm a little worried for Shinji. I was like, what will I do? What will I do if people hate me? Again, obligatory Attack on Titan spoilers real quick. Eventually, I want to do a video talking about 3 main protagonists in general. Shinji, Thorfinn from Vinland Saga, and Eren. I want to eventually do a video about them because of their similarities and dissimilarities. Eventually, one of these days when I get caught up with Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga Season 2 and finish this series. But I want to make note, the question of what will I do if people hate me, I feel like that is an unspoken question that Eren Yeager asks throughout season 4. I feel like that's an unspoken question that gets asked quite a lot in that season. It's not ever brought up, but it's always in the foreground with his character and his actions. You just feel that question. The moment I saw that on screen, I'm like, that's an Eren Yeager question. So I feel like that's a great point in Attack on Titan spoilers. Just wanted to bring it up. But yeah, what will I do if they hate me? What should I do? And I love the concept of Shinji just standing there in the suit. That him standing there in the suit is so good. Like, just, I want to get a picture of that. With the white moon below him. The spotlight on him. The spotlight on him like a one-act play, you know. What else? So then we go into here to the mist. And honestly, the mist in this episode, the scene with the mist and the thorny trees, it reminded me of episode 4, which is the hedgehog's dilemma. It reminded me of that episode when Shinji goes on his walkabout and he ends up going into the mountains by Tokyo 3 and he sees the mist surrounding him. It seems like that kind of just exaggerated. And so I find it fitting that there's the mist. He can't see through the fog, so he can't see what's in front of him, which could be answers. He can't find the answers. It could represent that. But you also have these thorny trees that he can't navigate. So it's just it's all closing in on him. And the thorny trees could also be a representation of the hedgehog's dilemma, where you're just you're shunning everyone outward. No one can come get him because they can't see where to go and the thorny trees are blocking their way. So there's that. That's all exciting. But yeah, he's stuck in this mist and it is really pretty. Again, very minimalist for budget constraints. It would be easy to animate. And he says, where am I? Where am I supposed to go? So I like that he's all in white. He looks almost like a ghost. And he asks, where do I go? So where do I go? What direction should I head? Where do I go now? I'm at this impasse. I don't know what to do. I can't see anything. I don't know what's what. And that could be tied to him being in the EVA unit. He doesn't know where he is. He can't see moving forward. That could be tied to that too. Asuka seems like she figures out where she's at pretty quick. But then he's like, Miss Masato. And he asks where Miss Masato is. It's like he was on the beach talking to her in that moment, and then he flashes to this moment. So I feel like the beach scene has been in his head. It actually happened. I do feel like the beach scene actually happened, but he was remembering it. And then it flashes to him in this mental state where he's like, where am I? Where did you go, Miss Masato? Where am I supposed to go now? I'm all alone. What do I do? And he asks for, I love the order he asks for people. He asks for Miss Masato. He asks for Asuka. He asks for Ayanami. And then from there, he asks for Toji, for Ida, for Miss Ritsuko, and then he asks for Mr. Kaji, and then he asks for Gendo. Gendo's the last person he asks for that's alive. Because you could argue he asks for his mother after that, because when he says mother, he's it's not an exclamation, he's like mother. So he yells out for everybody else. Gendo is the last living person he asks for help from because he knows he's not going to get it from him, but he's desperate. And then he says his mother's name, not asking for her to come out, but just recalling her. And he's like, someone tell me what I'm supposed to do. So he's just He's like, someone give me an answer. Because he's like, I'm not strong enough to do it on my own. I don't have the confidence. I don't know what to do. I can't do this alone. He's like, what am I supposed to do? And we could argue, we're like, no, Shinji, you can find the answer. You can find it for yourself. You can choose your own path and do it. And honestly, this is, again, I don't want to tag Attack on Titan spoilers every 5 minutes in this episode, but I will say this, and I'm not going to put a spoiler up, but just know, there is a moment in Attack on Titan where a character says, the moment you let others make decisions for you, that's when you die. Because they will make decisions that are not on your benefit, but their own. And that will lead to your death. You will not have control over your life. So the problem with this is that the moment others decide for Shinji, then he's as good as dead. Because he is not in control of his own life anymore. Others are in control of it. And as we've seen, everybody's kind of out for themselves. They'll just throw people to the wayside, yourself included, if you let them make decisions for you. So Shinji saying, someone give me the answer. It's like, no, you don't need others to decide for you, Shinji. You just need to come to I need Levi Ackerman to go to him and be like, you make the decision that you have the least regrets with. And Shinji's just not there. And then, God, that image of the Eva over him. And I want to make note that the way the Eva is standing with its hands like that, that is how the O2 unit was with Kaoru in the last episode. It had its hands around Kaoru and Kaoru was levitating, like orchestrating it. But again, Kaoru is kind of like the anti-Shinji. So Kaoru was perfectly comfortable, was like, had full control of the Eva and was like, yes, this is how things are supposed to be. Shinji is cowering before the Eva and does not have control of it. He's the polar opposite. So fun times. And he's like, the Evangelion Unit 01. God, and those eyes piercing him. And it grabs him just like it does with Kaoru. He's like, so ultimately I have no choice but to pilot it. So he feels he has no choice but to pilot. Like the Eva has control of him. The Eva has him under control. And so then we see, even after killing someone I love, he's like, even after killing it, do I have no choice but to be a part of this Eva pilot? Do I have no option even after it made me do something awful? Are you saying I'm supposed to listen to my father and everyone else and get back into this thing to fight? So that's a big question there. He's like, do I have to? Do I have to obey? The answer is no. He does not have to obey. If he does not want to get back in it and fight, he doesn't have to. But Shinji's trying to grapple with, what are the repercussions of if I say no? And so he's like, mother. At this point, he's like, say something, answer me. So he knows that Yui is in the O1 unit. Yui's in the O1 unit at this point. Somehow, she's in there. And so he's trying to have her give him an answer. Why do you pilot the Eva? And he just looks so disturbed there. So, but then the question is, why? Why pilot it? And he's like, because everyone tells me to. Because everyone tells me to. That's why you pilot the Eva? He says, it's for the good of everybody, so why does it matter? So, again, he says it's for the greater good. So why not? And there is, again, we could tie back to Attack on Titan all day long, but there is this concept that the reason he's doing it is, he says he's doing it for the greater good for everybody else, for the good of everybody. So why shouldn't I do it? Why not? But it's like, but you have to want to do it. It's like, and also that for the greater good of everyone else, who told you that? Other people did. Do those other people know everything? Are they gods? No. So they're not, totally flawless. So why do you have to listen to them? They're not you. They don't control your life. Why do you have to listen to those people? And so at that point, so you pilot the Eva for everybody, for others. He says, that's right. It's a good thing. And that line, it's a good thing, that's been said. That was part of the dialogue in Fly Me to the Moon when the people were talking about, they're like, it's a very good thing. It's a good thing. It's been repeated over and over again when the angels invaded their minds. That idea of it's a good thing. What I'm doing is a good thing. It's for the betterment of society, right? It's a very good thing. It's exactly what the angel said. Exactly what they were saying, right? If I piloted, everyone praises me and they treat me well. So again, that ties to it, that there's that concept of praise and being treated well. If I do what they tell me, and it's for the betterment of society, supposedly, that everyone will treat me well and they'll praise me. But has that actually really happened? No. You got praised once by Gendo and you focused on that this entire time. Masato said she's been proud of you a couple of times, but everybody else, you got punched in the face by Toji because of it. That wasn't praise. Asuka doesn't like you. That's not praise. Rei's been indifferent. So he tells himself this, but it's not entirely true. And then Asuka shows up and says, that's a lie. What are you, stupid? And this isn't really Asuka, but it's his mental projection of her. And it's the part of him that he kind of links with her. And she's like, no. She's like, you're just doing it for yourself. And he's like, oh. She's like, there you go, making up excuses once again for yourself. And she's in that dress she was in, like, previously. He's like, I am. And she's like, thinking that you're working hard for the sake of others. She's like, that in itself is the easy way to live. So she's like, I love that this projection of Asuka says that the easy way is to put blame on others instead of yourself. She's like, you want praise. You want recognition. You want these things. So this is all your doings. You are making you say you have no choice, but you are making a choice and you're making it for yourself. You're just trying to scapegoat everybody else and say that everyone else, it's because of for their benefit and because of them that you're doing things. She's like, but you just want them to praise you. You want this for yourself. And putting blame on others is the easy way out. But that's not how it is. That's not really how it is. And he's like, really? And then I love that the animation that's used when she turns around, it's reused animation. But again, it's how he's seen her. Seeing her in the yellow dress. Seeing her again. It's how he's seen her. She's like, in other words, you're lonely, Shinji. And he's like, really? It's like, yeah, that's just being dependent. She says, God, I'm running out of space. She says that you're lonely. She says you're lonely and dependent. You're just relying on others and for them to make you feel whole. And you're lonely. And Asuka says it's nothing but a symbiotic relationship. Yeah, it's symbiotic. And that could apply, that symbioticness, it could apply to him in the Eva. Like he needs the Eva to feel accomplishment, kind of like Asuka, which we'll talk about. And then it could be that. It could be the concept that he's symbiotic with other people. He's codependent. He needs people to feel like any type of satisfaction or self-gratification. It's kind of like when people need to be, when we talk about Masato, they need to be in a relationship to stave off that loneliness and isolation they feel. That's kind of like Shinji, except for Shinji, it's not a sexual or romantic relationship. It's that he just needs people's praise to give him a sense of self-worth. It's a symbiotic relationship. And it ties to a lot of psychological factors too, which I'm sure you all will note in the comments, right? And he says, you might be right. Like he's becoming self-aware. Shinji's like, he's realizing what his issues are. She's like, you just want people to need you. Yes, you want to be relied upon. And there are so many people in the world that are like that. I know friends as parents. There are people that want to be relied upon and they constantly are looking in need of someone to need them. They want to be relied upon to get that satisfaction out of their lives. And that seems to be like a wake-up call to Shinji. He's like, you're right. Like the look on his face where he's like, oh my God, yeah, I do want to be relied upon. I do want people to need me to help. And she's like, all you do is wait, wanting people to give you happiness. She's like, that's the problem. the conflict here, is you're not taking action for yourself. You want people to give happiness. She's like the conundrum here. The conundrum here is that you want people to rely upon you. You want them to need you. But the problem is you are not doing anything to make them want you or need you. So instead of taking action and doing something that would need you to be relied upon, you're waiting for people to give you that happiness. And she's like, those are two separate things that do not coincide. They do not lead to each other. So you're just stuck. You're being stagnant because you're not doing the action that you need to get the results that you want. Instead, you're waiting on something that's not going to happen. So it's all getting explained in this episode, right? You just want people to give you happiness. False happiness. She's like, the stuff that they're going to give you is not going to equate to what you want. She's like, so you're just waiting around for something that's not going to fill that void. It's not going to help you. So she's like, that's not going to work. But then Ray comes in and says, but that goes for you too. So I think that all three of them are in their individual units and they're all kind of syncing up as part of this stupid human instrumentality project that Gendo's got crafted. I think that they're all kind of syncing up and aligning with one another. Because then Ray pops in and is like, but that goes for you too. The second character, which is the case of Asuka Langley Soryu. And then we see that she is in the Eva unit and she's all hunched up, like all crouched in the fetal position. I don't remember getting on, but I'm back in the Eva again. I was put back in. It's not going to move anyway, this piece of junk. And then that line where she says, no, I'm a piece of junk. Like, I hate that. So we're going to move on to Asuka. We'll leave Shinji here trying to figure out everything. So Asuka views herself as a piece of junk. She just thinks she's useless. There's no reason for her to exist. And so she's like, they don't need me. No one needs me. She's not needed either. So she wants to be needed too. She's very similar to Shinji. She wants to be needed. She wants to have that purpose, right? And she says, no one needs a pilot who can't control her Eva. So you're seeking to find yourself in others. And she's like, shut up. So separation anxiety, that's drawn out. We have separation anxiety, attachment behavior. Those two things get brought back up from episode 22. And she is trying to find herself in others, which will connect over here to Masato. We'll connect back that over there, right? We'll connect that there. And so you're afraid of becoming alone. And I love that it's Ray that's asking these questions. You're afraid of becoming alone because you disappear along with the people around you. So she does not want to disappear and be alone. Yeah, because that's part of her fear. Part of her fear is that if she's not good enough to be the pilot, if she can't own up to what everyone else brings to the table, then she'll be discarded. She'll be abandoned, like by her father, by her mother. She won't be needed and she'll be alone and she'll just disappear along with those other people. And Asuka doesn't want to do that. She wants to live, but it's just too hard. She doesn't know how to connect. And so she's like, that's why you pilot the Eva. And we see the child version of her. I like that we see the child versions of Rei, Masato, and Asuka in this. We see the three child versions of all of them. And she's asking them to shut up. And she's like, no, I don't want to hear it from a puppet like you. And then we see Rei. And so then we have the third character. We're going to come back to Asuka. Asuka's going to come back. But then we switch over to Rei, right? She's like, I don't want to hear it from a puppet like you. In the case of Rei Ayanami, this whole episode is just like, where are our main characters at this point, psychologically? The answer is it is not in a good place. And she says, who am I? So she is having a crisis of identity. You know, who am I? Rei's having a crisis of who the heck am I, right? She says, Rei Ayanami. And I'm trying to think what she's sitting on. Like, in this moment, is she in the Eva unit or is she sitting, like, on something else? Like, who are you? Rei Ayanami. She's like, you're also Rei Ayanami? So she's questioning, like, the multiple sides of her. She's like, yes, I am the thing that is called Rei Ayanami. So she refers to herself as a thing. As a thing. And so then we are the things that are called Rei Ayanami. And so, yeah, we see the younger version of her, right? And it's referring to the things, referring to all the clones that exist. We are the things that are called Rei Ayanami. And she's like, how can we all be me? And she says, because everyone calls us that. It's kind of that we were talking in the comments for episode 23 about the Freudian thing where sometimes a cigarette is a cigarette. And it's just like naming things, giving it a label and an identity. There's a whole psychological discussion. You could start with that. And my best friend is someone that's very like concrete. And so abstract concepts where she's like, I don't even want to talk about the whole is a chair a chair. She's like, nope, don't want to bring it up. I was like, but it's so fun and fascinating. She's like, just tell me what it is. I want to know concrete stuff, not this abstract psychological mumbo jumbo. I'm like, fine. But yeah, everyone calls us Rei. So everyone calls us the same thing. So we must be the same thing, right? But this Rei is like, no. She's like, that's not right. She's like, why do you possess a false heart and body? We see that floating head of like that Shinji saw of her back when he was like experimenting with the dummy plugs. So the idea of a false heart and body. Not soul, false heart and body. The soul of Rei is still there, but it's the body and heart that is not. Why do you possess it? And she says, they're not false because I am me. So she's saying, no, they're real. They're real. And I am my own individual. She's like, no. She's like, I'm my own person. She's like, there's no false version of me. I'm here. This is reality. It can't be false because it's fact. I'm here. So I like that angle that she takes with it. And the idea of her closing the case on Gendo's glasses. That symbolism. No, you are a person whose false soul was created by the human Gendo Akari. So basically saying, I'm going to put Gendo over here, saying that Gendo created a false soul that is Rei. I love the symbolism of her putting the broken glasses in the case and shutting it. Being like, nah, I love it. They're like, no, you're a false soul. And she shuts the case. So, like she's shutting out Gendo from her heart. She's shutting that case and putting him away. And she just even the action, she closes it for certain, like gets it clamped shut. You're nothing but an object living a lie, pretending to be a person. So the inside is questioning if she's an object pretending to be human. Like, is she real or not? Is she like Pinocchio? Is she real? What's the deal? And she says, see, there's a dark part of your heart inside of you. And we see it keeps cutting. And I'm like, it's Yui, right? So the question is Yui the dark part of her heart? All this time, Yui has been framed as a innocent patron saint. Like, she's this beautiful matron of martyrdom. But I'm like, was Yui really that great? When she says there's the dark part of your heart inside of you that you can see nothing of, that you know nothing of. But we see that it's with Yui. So, and that would go back to whenever little baby Rei was getting onto Ritsuko's mom and making fun of her. And Ritsuko's mom was connecting that to Yui, right? So is Yui this dark part of her heart that she knows nothing of? Again, I'm hoping End of Evangelion in episode 26 give us some concrete answers, but at this point, Everything is so subjective and abstract that I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if Anna was like, nah, I'm not giving you any answers. But yeah, we see that flashback. That's where the real you is. So she's suggesting, like child Ray is suggesting that the dark part that is Yui inside of you is the only thing real. Everything else is fabricated and false. Everything else is something that Gendo has created. But the real you is that part from Yui that's darkness. And she's like, I'm me. And she's like, because I am who I am through the time that I've spent with the connections I've made with other people. So Ray gets what's up. Ray is like, no. She's like, no. My environment and connections have shaped me. She's like, no. She's like, she's like, the version of who I am, even if it's a clone, is different than the rest and its own individual person because I've made connections with these people and that's shaped my heart and soul. The current me has been molded through contact with other people. So yeah, so she's like, and we get that shot of her descending into the water and it's kind of like the shot from the OP, right? She's like, no, this environment that I've shaped around me has made me different than you. So no, I'm my own individual. I'm not just an object living a lie. No. And I wonder, we have that version of her floating and then we see Shinji smile afterwards. So I wonder, maybe by episode 26, Shinji will realize the same thing Ray has and it won't be so bad. But she's like, no, contact with people and the passage of time changed the shape of my heart. She's like, no, even if I'm a clone, my experience makes me my own, right? So I am my own individual. Like, she seems pretty confident about that, right? Is that what the ties are? And she's like, yes, the things that have created the me called Rei Ayanami so far are those ties. Yes, are the things that will continue to shape me. She's like, no, the people I come in contact with, my environment, I will keep continuing to change and evolve as a person because of those things. Like, Ray seems to know what's up and answers the question, but the real you is somewhere else. And then we see all the tube, you just don't know it. And we see all those versions for her because you don't want to see it. So there's this lingering doubt that even though Ray seems to know who she is and have a very good idea of her identity, there is a lingering doubt that there are parts of her she does not know. Which is true. There's parts of her she can't know because she doesn't have access to that. You're just avoiding it without realizing it because you're afraid. I love the like Rochart, like just the it's like the test that they give you to see what do you see, because it may not be human in form. So yeah, there's a part that's kind of like you're afraid that part of you is not human. And I wonder if the imagery that they give us, like these little splotch art tests, if they're like forms of the angel. That'd be really cute if it was forms of the angel. Kind of, yeah. They look like the Eva or forms of the angel that we see before us, and there's like a butterfly and everything. That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, if it's all those things forming the different shapes of the angels. Yeah, okay. That's probably what it is. Because the person that I've been so far may cease to exist. You're afraid. Because, yeah, at this point, she's the only Ray left. The other Rays have been killed. You're afraid of ceasing to exist. And we see the little girl version of her with all the other Rays behind her. It's a very creepy imagery. I'm going to take a picture of it. It's very creepy, though. Which, this makes me wonder, if we see Ritsuko in the LCL fluid, if we see her in that, when we get to Ritsuko, I'll bring something up. But yeah, you're afraid of being erased from everyone's hearts. So she is afraid of being forgotten. That's kind of the thing, was that she made contact with Shinji in episode 23 before she died and like sacrificed herself and thought that was, enough, but And Ray's like, afraid? I don't understand. And this other version, like it's like when the angel talked to her back in episode 23, your own individual world will also cease to exist. It frightens you, doesn't it? You'll cease to exist. And it's like that close-up where the nose and everything is big. Ugh. It frightens you, doesn't it? And we have her in the seat with the moon spotlighted underneath her, the white moon. Mm-hmm. She's like, no, it makes me happy. So, ceasing to exist. Ceasing to exist. She says that it makes her happy because I want to die. She wants to die. Like Kaoru. Kaoru's like, you're like me. You want to die. So, God, does that mean that Shinji wants to die too? We'll tie back to it. But like Kaoru's like, you're just like me. So she says, because I want to die. What I desire is despair. I want to return to nothingness. So is that really her thought, or is that the instrumentality project? That's the thing. Is that really her thought? So she says she wants despair and nothingness, which kind of contradicts what she said earlier about the connection shaping her. So it's like, how are these people being manipulated? I feel like they're being manipulated by Gendo to an extent. So she says she wants to return to nothingness, but I can't. I cannot return to nothingness. So she says that she's being denied. She's being denied that return. She is being denied it. I cannot return to nothingness. He won't let me return. He won't let me go back yet. I exist because he needed me. So, and we see her looking at Gendo with the smile from like back in episode 3. Mm-hmm. So she's like, Gendo needs me. So it's interesting because it almost seems like she's the opposite of Shinji. Shinji says that he wants to be relied upon. She does not. She's like, I want to go back. I just want to die. I don't want to keep coming back to life to serve someone else. I want to be in charge of my own existence. And like Kaoru, she's like, I'm ready to go. And she's like, he keeps needing me. He won't let me go back. But it's over now. He's not going to need me anymore. He's going to abandon me. And that's tying to Asuka. So she's saying that it's over now. Now that Kaoru is gone, she thinks Gendo will abandon her. And that ties to Asuka and how she feels a sense of abandonment. I thought I had wished for this day to come, but now I'm afraid. Yeah. Oh my God. And then we see her next to Gendo. And Gendo saying, let us go. You've existed for this day today, Ray. Oh my God. The day that he needs her. And she's like, yes. And then, so Gendo comes to get Ray. We're going to see, so Gendo has gotten Ray. So Gendo takes Ray for quote unquote her purpose, which is tied to this human instrumentality project, whatever that entails. He's tying it to that. I'm a bit terrified. But yeah, she's like, but she comes to she's like, I wanted to die. I wanted to return to nothingness because I thought that that's what I wanted. She's like, but now that it's actually happening, I am afraid. I don't want that to happen now. I kind of want to stay around. So it's like, oh my God. And then the instrumentality of mankind begins. So whatever happens from here on, this whole process is starting this human instrumentality. Okay. So we just need to flip Whiteboard Kun over at this point. And I know I haven't even started on Masato, but we'll tie back to her. We'll just come back to her. We'll just tie back to Masato and put her on this side. So human instrumentality. The human instrumentality project. Where is Seal? Where is Simon Says? We don't care. I need to put this back a little bit so y'all can see it. There we go. That's a little bit better there. All right. So I'm going to put out here to the side questions. Questions we still have. And I may be flipping this board back over when we get to Gendo and Masato, just so you all know. But questions we still have. So Seal, Simon Says, that Keel guy, the other Evas. What about all them? We got, you know, what about the other 8 Evas? What about Keel? What about Seal and Simon Says? Now that Kaoru's gone, are we going to touch base on them again? Maybe, maybe not. We'll just see. So the human mentality, it begins. The world ending. Episode 25. Do you love me? Mm-hmm. Once again, Shinji Ikari. And that shot of Shinji in the darkness, naked, like Asuka was. Right? What is this sensation? So I believe at this point that Asuka and Shinji are in their EVA units. I don't believe that they're in there willingly. I think they were shoved into their EVA units as part of this instrumentality project. We also know that Rei is probably a catalyst for this, and that she possibly has parts of Yui and an angel in her, whatever that entails. So we know that. But everything Shinji is describing about the sensation, where he's like, I've experienced it before. Yeah, he experienced it when he was being absorbed by the angel. The shape of my body is melting away. And he's like, and it feels really good. And I feel like I'm growing and expanding outward. On and on. That was the beginning of the instrumentality of people. This is pretty terrifying in all reality. It's pretty terrifying. I am not on board with the instrumentality of people. Not, for the record, not on board this. So Shinji, at this point, is possibly going back to the primordial soup mode. And is melting from his physical form again. So that's happening. That whole bizarreness is happening again. Okay. What people are lacking. So there's this concept that we're going to talk about over here of what people are lacking. There's that concept, right, that's brought up in this. The loss in their hearts. So the concept of loss in their hearts. That basically there is this void, right? There's this unfillable void, right? In order to fill that void in their hearts, the instrumentality of hearts and souls begin. So the concept here is that the instrumentality is going to fill the void of the hearts and souls of humanity. That's a very bold assertion that everyone is in the same boat as everyone, and they all, you know, again, if y'all just gave them therapy at Nerve, we wouldn't have this problem. Because Gendo is running under the assumption that everyone is as inept at living as he is. And yeah, he's put Asuka, Shinji, and Rei kind of in this situation along with Masato and Asuka, and Ritsuko, I mean, that yeah, sure, that may be the case, but not everyone is like that. Not everyone is psychologically suffering like you all. We can't help it that Nerve is this cult of psychologically damaged people, Gendo. We can't help it you've cultivated this cult where everybody has a lot of baggage, but not everyone on Earth is like that. So why? Why? Returning all things to nothingness. It is like the most nihilistic thing ever. Returning all to nothingness. is absolutely terrifying. The idea of just not existing. The instrumentality of people had begun. And then he's like, no. Now Gendo, again, we're gonna flip this back over, right? I'm feeling this is editing on this is gonna be fun. But Gendo is like, no, it's not that we're returning to nothingness. It's not returning to nothingness. It's not that, guys. Don't freak out. No, it's not that. It's that we're restoring everything to its original state. It's not that. We're just going back to square one. Maybe if we try it a second time around, we'll figure it out, right? And what's really curious about this is that there's this concept, and I'm watching Vinland Saga the same time I'm watching this show, and so I guess Vinland Saga spoilers. But in Vinland Saga, I've recently watched this episode, like literally a few days ago, where a character comes to this big conclusion, and they're talking about religion, which religion is tied to Neon Genesis in a lot of ways, but they're talking about this concept of that mankind was expelled from paradise, and that what was lost is that in exchange for wisdom, we lost that part of our heart that embodies true love. And so the episode is called Do You Love Me? So again, Yukimura, who created Vinland Saga, probably watched this show too and drew some inspiration as well. But the idea behind it is that, and I'm going to have to go back to the stupid board again. But the idea here is that there's this idea of exchanging wisdom and science for the loss of humanity and love. Yeah, and Gendo's like, oh no, we're just restoring everything to its original state. That's all. But in Vinland Saga, there's this concept that when mankind disobeyed God, they lost wisdom. They got wisdom and knowledge, but in turn, they lost the ability to love, and they lost that piece of humanity that is essential for them to survive and be able to coexist with one another without conflict. And because of that, now humanity is just kind of doomed, according to that series, to be constantly in conflict with one another because they can never gain back that which was lost. And it seems like Gendo has reached this point where he's realized that too. He's like, humanity is always going to have this void in their heart, and we're never going to get that true ability to love back. So his solution is, well, then we'll just go back to square one and return to the state of nothingness, and then we won't have to worry about conflict. Worrying about conflict? Not have to worry about it. Worrying about all the problems in the world and the fact that we lie or are deceitful to one another? If we just return to our original state, we won't have to worry about that. It's totally fine. Yeah. So he's like, that's all we'll do. And then we get the shot of Ritsuko with the shot in her back, like passed out in the LCL fluid. The fudge, we are only returning to our mother who has been lost to this world. So Gendo, he relates the idea of love to the mother lost. And that could reflect to Yui. It could reflect on this piece of humanity. I feel like the mother that was lost, I feel like he's relating that to Yui in some sense, but we're just going to return to her. It's fine. We're going back to where we came from. It's all fine, guys. Everything's great. The idea that we're just going to go back to... It's sort of like Kaoru in the last episode returning back to his father. Returning back to... I mean, Adam was both his father and mother, I guess, in that sense. So there's that. But then we get Ritsuko's been shot. And then we get this image of Masato being shot. What the hell? We don't get any explanation. All souls will become one and find eternal peace. And this concept of eternal peace, and I know this is ridiculous, right? This idea of eternal peace is sandwiched across this image of bloodshed and violence and Masato being shot. So the idea is that all souls will become one and there will be eternal peace. I don't know, Gendo. All these souls seem to have some issues, so you really think that putting them all together and conglomerating them, but then that's a problem because this whole series has been about loneliness and not wanting to be alone. If you merge all the souls into one, you're alone. So how does that work? That doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't create eternal peace. We've spent this entire series talking about how we don't want to be alone. We are creatures that want compassion and companionship. We just are constantly in a situation. These characters, not every people and all people in humanity, but these characters in the show just have barriers that are making it to where they can't communicate to one another. Making one soul means that it will be alone. That's not good. That's not how this is supposed to be. You just hired some therapists. But this image of Masato, like, what the fudge? Why? Why is she dead? Who killed her? So, those are questions. Who killed Kaji, Masato, and Ritsuko? We don't know if Fuyu-chan and the others are still alive. We don't know that yet. But who killed them? I want to know these answers. Like, what the fudge? That's all there is to it. Like, that's it. Like, why, I'm just, like, floored. I'm like, what? How? Nope. Like, as he's melting away. I'm not really for the fact that we don't get answers, but I'm glad this is a to be continued so that we can possibly get some more as we go. That'd be great. He's like, that's all there is to it. Gendo's like, don't worry. I'm creating eternal peace. I've been doing the right thing this whole time. Like, Gendo, no! So maybe this psychosexual analytical thing, I've been looking at it the wrong way this whole time. Maybe it's not been about Shinji, but about Gendo. Has Gendo met all of these psychosexual development analyses, checkpoints? Is he at the point where at the very end of this, he's well-being, compassionate and caring, warm, caring, and compassionate? Is Gendo a well-rounded human being at this point? He's just trying to create a utopia, guys. Oh my God, no. So yeah, and so Masato asks about, switch this over again. Whiteboard Kun is going to need a break after this. So then we get to Masato, right? Just a mess. And she says that's the instrumentality. So Masato seems like not on board with the human instrumentality, with the hip project. It's hip to be square, right? She says that's the human instrumentality. And then Ritsuko's like, yeah, that's right. There's always a void, a part that has been lost in our hearts. So again, there's this idea that there is a loss in our hearts that this project will fill. Seems like a problem. Yep. And I'm like, were the angels trying to stop this from happening? Was that the whole point? Was that they didn't want to... And that is what gives rise to the hunger in our hearts, that we want to fill that void. I'm like, were the angels trying to stop us from getting to this point? What gives rise to fear and insecurity? So the loss is tied to fear, insecurity, and hunger. Okay? Which are all negative things, right? Every single person fears that darkness in their heart and lives life trying to escape from it and to banish it. So basically we try to like run from this existential dread that we can't escape, that there's always going to be something missing from our lives. And it's like, yeah, I guess. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm running from, I feel like if I'm running from anything, it's from this human instrumentality project of returning to nothingness. I feel like that's the thing I would dread the most. I'd want to live my life and be worried about that, right? About it ending. Even though it will never disappear as long as we remain human. So it's like, well, in that case, if you're constantly going to be bombarded with this sense, I mean, you can either do, I guess, two things. You can either live in this sense of existential dread and just be constantly aware of something missing from your life, I guess, or you could just live your life to the fullest and try to, I don't know, be a human being. They need therapists. Go to therapy, you lot. That's why you're going to bundle all human souls together so we can compensate for the void in each other. I love that Masato is like, this is a stupid plan. This is dumb. I like that Masato is like, so we're gonna just all conglomerate all souls so there's no void. That's your plan? She's like, but if we all have a void, then are we really filling each other by being one soul? Like, how does that doesn't seem like it's gonna work. And Ritsuko's like, and you're just gonna do this to everyone? Mind your own business! Yeah, I love that Masato's like, this is taking away everyone's choice and everyone's freedom. Stop. Quit doing this. And she says, it's nothing more than a conspiracy to deceive us. And she's like, but you've been wishing for it to happen too. And Masato's like, what? And so now we go to Masato. And she says, where am I? In the case of Masato Katsuragi, part 1. So these part 1s that we're getting with Asuka and Masato, we're going to tie back in the next episode too, I feel like. So Shinji, he says, this is the me that exists in your mind, Miss Masato. And she's like, oh, okay. At the same time, the me that exists in your mind, right? So yeah, so Masato and Shinji are kind of realizing that they have versions, like how they perceive the other person, right? So I must connect with all sorts of people in order to find out who I am. So that's how she sees Shinji. She has this part of Shinji in her brain, this part of Shinji that is trying to find his identity. And it's funny that she connects that version of Shinji to herself. So in her mind, she sees Shinji as constantly trying to find himself. But because it's in her mind, she's like, well, that's kind of how I view me. I'm trying to figure out who I am as well. That's why she connects to him so much. I have to search deep within myself. I must search deep within the Miss Masato that exists in my mind. She's like, what is it that you want, Miss Masato? So maybe part of this, again, if they're all mind merging and becoming one, maybe this is all a big mind meld at this point, and that's what's happening, which could be it, right? But so we have this, he's like, I want to know, what are you trying to find, Masato? And she's the idea of the good girl. The idea of the good girl. And so I have to be a good girl. Why? Because my dad's not around. And I love the picture with the cuts and the tape, she's being torn apart and re-put back together over and over again. That visual is so good. I love it in this episode. But you know who she reminds me of? Again, kind of Attack on Titan spoilers. If you've not seen seasons 1 through 3 of Attack on Titan, ignore this conversation for 30 seconds. I'm not going to put a thing up here, but just ignore it. But Masato, in this point where she's talking about being the good girl, reminds me of both Annie and Historia in Attack on Titan. The idea of, because their parents are either not around or not good to them, they struggle to have this crisis of identity and try to be the good girl to compensate and be what other people want to see in them. So just gonna throw that out there. But yeah, because my dad is not around and I have to help my mom and be a good girl because other people are relying on me. So she's talks about being relied on by others. And that's kind of the dark side of what Shinji wants. Shinji wants to be relied upon, but Masato kind of represents, okay, well, what if you are relied upon? Then you kind of can't be yourself. You have to present the self of you, this version of you, again, kind of like Krista in Attack on Titan, this version of you that's not perhaps genuine. But I don't want to become like my mom. So she's like, she does not want to be her mom. She doesn't want to become like her mom. We see the blocks where she's like, because she was always crying when my dad isn't here. She doesn't want to be like her mom and feel that loss of neglect. Because her mom would cry when her dad wasn't around. She doesn't want to be like that. She doesn't want to be someone that is dependent. She does not want to be dependent. So there it is. Does not want to be dependent, like her mother was on her father. She wants to be self-sufficient, right? Which is kind of tied to Asuka, right? And she says, no crying, no being spoiled. Oh my gosh, I want to get a picture of that image of her being like taped back together. That's why I have to be a good girl. And has like the rocket ship there, which is kind of like, and the tape. I'm going to do my best so that my dad won't hate me. So she's kind of like Asuka and Shinji combined, right? Does not want dad to hate her. She's kind of like Asuka and Shinji combined. She wants not only to be, she wants to be self-sufficient like Asuka, and she wants to be able to be seen and does not want to be neglected or abandoned, but she also doesn't want her father to hate her. So she's kind of like Shinji and Asuka kind of combined, which is interesting, which makes sense because Shinji's in the blue, Asuka's in the red, Masato has purple hair. This has been there all along. She's like, but I hate my father, which is exactly how Shinji feels. Exactly. That's why I hate being good too. She's like, I hate having to put on a facade. She's like, I hate it all now, which is like Asuka. It's like, I'm so tired of having to maintain my clean image of myself for keeping up this pretense of being so pristine. So this persona of pristine, that it's a facade. She's like, I don't want to be a good girl. Again, that ties to that character in Attack on Titan. She's like, I don't want to be a good girl. I want to be myself. I don't want to have to live up to anybody else's standards but my own. I'm tired of it. I want to be dirty. I wanted to see what I looked like when I was no longer perfect. So she's like, my whole advances towards men, things like that. She's like, I wanted to be like that because I wanted to see what I would be like if I wasn't upholding this image of being the good girl, right? And so then at that point, Ritsuko's like, is that why you slept with him, with that man? And she says, no, I slept with him because I loved him. Now, she doesn't say that man because I loved him. I'm assuming it's referring to Kaji. And I know people in the comments will be like, oh, it could refer to this and that and this and that. I think it's Kaji. She loved Kaji, right? Because we do flash back to him after this. Okay, and I wanted to go back to that image of her. We're without the text, right? But then we get the child version of herself. And the child version is like, did you really love him? And she's like, yes, I did. So there's a question of, he accepted me for who I am. Really? He was kind to me. So the question is who she loved, the man that she loved. I'm going to just put Kaji down here for now. That he loved and accepted her and was kind to her. Okay? He was kind to me, and we see that image there. So, okay, what was that image? What was that? I want to go back to that. So just hold on. I'm going to try to pause that. Oh, yeah, and it's Kaji and Masato. Yeah, it's Kaji. So yeah, there's a little pixelated image here, and in the image it's Kaji that is pixelated. You can see his eyebrows and everything the way that it's set. It's Kaji and it's her having sex, right? And then there is the fan blowing, and we see the beer cans and everything, and the fan is blowing on her, and we see the books and everything. And there's Shinji looking at her. Mm-hmm. Okay, Shinji looking at her. And he looks disappointed. Yeah. So, okay. So for a second, and her saying that, and it just zooms in on him slowly, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, stop, I don't show this part of me to Shinji. Ooh. Okay, I want to go back to that image of... I like that there's the reversal where instead of her looking, it's him. Okay, so don't show this part of me to Shinji. So in this part of the episode, Shinji's disappointment. it's a pretty loaded scene, and I felt like in the moment I wanted to go back and see what that pixelated image was, because for a moment I was like, man, was Jimmy Russell's theory about her having sex with Shinji like real? Was I wrong? And so, but I don't think that's it. The pixelated image is her having sex with Kaji. It is. It's her having sex with Kaji. That is the image. It's pixelated. It's like from the OP, the imagery there. But the guy sitting down on the bed looking up at her is Kaji. Like, if you depixelated that, it's not Shinji, it's Kaji. However, that image of her, she has an image of her as a guardian, as a mother figure that she's trying to project to Shinji. And the thing of it is, Shinji's not been fooled by it this entire time. From day one, Shinji has known that she is dirty. That's the thing. She tries to portray herself as this guardian figure, but Shinji already knows better. He sees her, and I'm wondering, I imagine in that moment of him looking at her with the fan, that she's exposed. She might have been naked, like on the blanket, like it could have been after her and Kaji had sex that he sees her, and she doesn't want him to see her like that. Because yeah, it's kind of like what parental figure wants their kid to walk in on them having sex? No one. Like what parental figure wants the kid that they're trying to protect to see them exposed and indecent? None. So for Masato, she's like, I don't want Shinji to know that I'm dirty. I don't want him to know, because I want him to feel like I can be that pristine person he comes to. But the problem is Shinji's always known that she's dirty. He's known from day one, like, that she's been an alcoholic. He's known from day one that she's messy, that she's not in control of her life. Like, he's known this. And so she's just tried to be, like, in denial about it, right? And she's like, I don't... And Shinji sees that side of her. And he's like, there's no reason to be embarrassed after all that has happened. And it's Kaji saying it. So I'm like, yeah, Kaji's like, Shinji knows we have relations. Like there's no reason to be embarrassed about it. And she's like, it is embarrassing to her. She's like, because she feels, we'll get into this, how she describes it. And he's like, why is it embarrassing? He's like, you have no problem. You actually enjoy it. Like, you presenting the side of yourself to the man that you love. And she's like, stop. So again, I think that she is afraid. She's afraid of revealing this quote unquote dirty side to Shinji. Now, does that mean that she didn't expose herself to Shinji? Does that mean that she didn't present herself to Shinji or offer herself to Shinji? I don't know. I don't think so, but if you wanted to argue it, this episode could be evidence of that. But the concept of did she have sex with Shinji? No. Because I think that image of Shinji looking at her, he is above her. He is looking down at her in this moment, so it puts him in a position of power. If she had taken advantage of Shinji, he would not be in a position of power, right? He'd be a victim. I don't think that's it. I think that Shinji is looking at her. Now, did she expose herself to Shinji or make a move at him? You could argue that. And I think that maybe she's upset about that. But I think that Shinji's disappointment in her in this moment is a sign that he did not have sex with her. But if she did expose herself to him, that he was like not having any of it. And he was like, like, how could you do that? But I don't think that's it. I think that Shinji has just seen that this side of her she didn't want to present to other people, that she wanted for herself but didn't want others to see. And that disappointment in him, and the fan like blowing, right? In all honesty. Now the voice says you're actually happy to show this to Shinji, and she's like, no, I'm not. It's a lie, you're wrong. And she's like, I don't know about that. You actually want to show this to your father, don't you? And that part of it is like, oh shit, and what? Well, now we're getting past Shinji and getting into the father, and she's like, no. You saw peace in Kaji's face as he slept. Like, you made the move on Kaji and you wanted that peace. And she's like, oh, you're wrong. So yeah, again, you sought peace in Kaji as he slept. I'm like, I don't think she had sex with Shinji. I think she did with Kaji. And it's just, the voice in her head is like, you wanted Shinji to know about it. And she's like, ah. And I feel like in her mind, she's seeing Shinji. And Shinji is a representation of that innocence that's looking down on her and being like, you're not a good person. Like, I feel like that's the representation Shinji's giving to her, that she's not a good person. and that she can't present herself as a figure, a pristine guardian to Shinji because of what she's done with Kaji. And it's like, you sought peace in Kaji's warmth. And she's like, you're wrong. You sought your father in Kaji's arms. And she's like, it's not true. Again, relating to Asuka and Shinji both, them holding their heads in their hands. They're like, that's right. That time I did see my father in Kaji, which we've talked about in the previous episode. That's why I ran away from him. So she did not want to admit, she loved her father, because she said she hated her father. So the fact that she saw her father within Kaji is why she ran away. She's like, if I love Kaji and he reminds me of my father, I'm admitting I love my father, which I don't want to do. And that could also tie why she sees Shinji disappointed in her mind, because she's like, she knows that Shinji hates his father as well. And so she's like, man, if I love Kaji, who's like my dad, and I'm admitting I love my father, then I'm not relating to Shinji anymore, and Shinji won't find that connection with me anymore, and that could lead to his disappointment as well. So there's a whole slew of things tied up in the layers of this. It's kind of insanity. She's like, I was scared. If it was as if he were my father, but it was actually because I was happy. Which again, she's tying to the fact, she's like, I actually was happy to be with him. So it was okay if he was like my dad. And that's taking something, like if you are convinced you don't like your parent, and then you meet somebody that's like your parent and you do like them, then that's going to obviously skew your entire view of, did I actually like them? And that ties back to Melania the Severed, that whole concept of, God, what was it? It was, I feel bad because I can't actually find the notes, Melania, that you mentioned, but it's that concept that we don't want to admit something and then it comes out to be true. It was like something that had to do with the psychological development. It was a psychological term, and I can't remember what it was, but it's tying to what Misato is struggling with, right? Because she was actually happy and she derived pleasure from it. It was a moment of unbearably wonderful feeling. So it's admitting that she was happy in this moment, but her source of happiness was something that she had hated about herself for a long time. So it's like completely changing the way that she views herself in this moment, and she didn't know what to do with that. And it's like, that's why I hated it, because I liked it. That's why I split up with him, because I didn't want to admit that that it was okay, right? And he says, I guess it just means love begins for no reason, but ends for a reason. Being like, love is something that doesn't have an explanation. It just happens. But it only ends when you give it a reason. He's like, love can happen to you and there's no explanation for it. You can't reason with it. But if it ends, it's for a reason. You've done it yourself, right? That it's kind of your fault that it's happened. And she says, you're so kind, Kaji. Take that kindness and tarnish me with it. She's like, I want to be dirty, and I want you to like use that kindness against me. It's like, And Kaji, I'm glad we get an image of Kaji. We get like a little shot of him from beyond the grave with his 5 o'clock shadow. He's like, just because you hate yourself now doesn't mean you should hurt yourself. Kaji, words of wisdom, where he says that just because you hate yourself doesn't mean you should hurt yourself. Exactly. He's like, you may feel like you don't like yourself or whatever, but he's like, don't hurt yourself. That's only going to make it worse. That's not good, right? That's just fooling yourself into feeling better by punishing yourself for the moment. Like that whole self-pity, he's like, no, you're just going to feel better for a moment, but it's not going to be lingering. Like that doesn't solve the problem. It does not cure the symptoms. You should stop doing that. Like he's trying to help her. And she says, are you going to tell me to be good to myself, right? Which is what she did not want to hear, right? So it kind of ties back to Asuka. She's like, are you going to tell me what I don't want to hear? You going to tell me to be good to myself? That's what all men are like. And then we don't get to hear his answer, which is frustrating. We don't get to hear what Kaji's answer was to her. After that, they go off to work and into their own worlds. So in her mind, she's like, that's all you do. She's like, she kind of gets mad at Kaji because she's like, you're going to give me this advice, but then you're going to abandon me and go off into your own world and leave me to it. And she finds she's frustrated because of that, right? Oh my God, leaving me behind, just like father. And she's like, I liked it, but it's exactly like him. All I'm ever doing is running away from the harsh reality. So that's the thing, running away from the harsh reality. We'll flip this back over in a minute and put that down. Running away from the harsh reality. And like, harsh reality, that's me, isn't it? Of course, just look at me. It's only to be expected. And that's when she went to touch him to get relief and comfort, and Shinji like turned her away. Sometimes I lose all hope for myself and I hate it. So yeah, she loses hope for herself. And that's the thing. She loses hope for herself, and she believes that reality is making it to where there's no happy ending for her. She's like, oh, well, the guys in my life are just going to use me and leave me, and so there's nothing good from it. And she feels like she's being self-destructive. She's like, I keep trying to use men in retaliation, and it backfires. So yeah, she may have tried in that moment to reach out and grab Shinji's hand, but he denied her. He was like, nope, not going to have anything to do with you. And she's like, realizes like, why did I do that? I know I shouldn't do that, right? I hate it. And then we have these other moments where it's like, Maya says, filth, you're so dirty. Like, she feels judged by Maya in that moment. She feels judged by Ritsuko for saying that you're pathetic. She feels judged by Asuka saying you're disgusting and foul. Like, you call that a mature relationship, you make me puke. And then she has Hyuga that says, congratulations on your promotion, Major Katsuragi. Like, she just feels like she has all these women around her telling her she's awful and doing these bad things. And then the one guy shows up and he's like, oh, congratulations, Masato. Like, he's just using her. And she says the person being recognized. Oh, we actually get her height and weight. We get her height is 163 centimeters. Like, height is 82. Weight is 47 kilograms. Age 29. Blood type AO. All right, and what we see here, we see her is me who's putting on a performance in order to be recognized. Her photo looks awful. Her photo there looks awful. It's not the real me. She's like, I've lost hope for myself that I can be myself, so I put on a persona just like Asuka that is not me. It's not the real me. And again, the real you is always crying. So Masato and Asuka have so much in common. Like, they're just putting on this persona to like try to appease to people, but it's not who they really are. And we see the child versions of them showing how they really are inside. And she says that she's happy. She's like, oh no, I'm happy. And they're like, am I happy? And she goes, I'm happy. Like, are you happy? I'm happy. And she tries to tell herself that, but then she's like, no, this isn't happiness. She's deceiving herself. She says it's happiness, but then it's not. She's like, what is happiness? She's like, this isn't the real me. And then it asks, like, I only made myself believe that it is. So for her, happiness is being herself. So that's another reason why she kind of hated herself in the moment with Kaji, was because she was happy, but it was revealing something about herself that she'd kind of contradicted her whole life. So, and then, is that what we have to do to keep on living? Then we see the version of Shinji, and to her, again, Shinji in her mind is a symbol of like self-discovery, and it's a symbol of like the young version of herself trying to find herself, and she equates that to Shinji in this moment. So he says, is that what we have to do to keep on living? And I want to see, like, you're afraid when you're not together. So it's like we're just deceiving ourselves. Is that what we have to do to keep living? You're insecure unless you're sleeping with someone by your side. So she's codependent. She didn't want to admit that she's like her mother, but she is. She didn't want to admit. She wanted to say that she's different than her mom and she doesn't need anybody. She's a strong, independent woman, don't need no man. But she does. She's a dependent person. She doesn't want to be alone. She wants to be with someone. Are you scared of sleeping by yourself? Are you lonely sleeping by yourself after all? I like that Ikari is like, and then Kaji, you can't bear the loss in your heart. Yeah, and she's afraid that she's like the one person she opened up to and loved is gone now. And she's like, what do I do? Like, how do I go on, right? And he says, that's why you'll be with anyone. It doesn't matter who. So it does suggest that there's a possibility that she did maybe have relations with Hyuga, or wanted to, or was going to, because she was like, I just need somebody. I mean, there's people out there. I know people that they always have to be in a relationship. They always have to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They're just codependent about that. And the thing is, the show makes it seem like that's a bad thing, but it's just, some people are like that. I mean, you should have respect for yourself and love for yourself, but it's not necessarily bad if you want to be with somebody. But I do think that codependency, when you're just with somebody to be with somebody and you don't actually love them, that's where there's a problem. And I think that the voices in her head are trying to question, like, did you really love Kaji, or were you just being with him to be with somebody? And I do think she did love Kaji. Now, Hyuga, anybody else? I think that she did love Kaji, and that's why she's so conflicted, because Kaji reminded her of her dad, and she had a lot of issues with that. But I think that the voice in her head is trying to be like, you're just trying to be with somebody to be with somebody. And that's not necessarily a good thing. And she says that's not true. You just wanted to give yourself over to simple pleasure. It's like, I feel like Rocky Horror is playing in the background, like during this whole thing. Like, Don't Dream It, Be It is playing in the background. You just want to soothe your soul through temporary escapes. And you're using men to that end. And she's like, you're wrong. You're wrong. And then the shot of Shinji, who's like that innocent representation of herself. What could it be that she wants? So in Shinji's head, he's like, what does Miss Masato want? And it's that she just doesn't want to be alone. She wants to be loved. The question in this entire episode is, do you love me? She wants to be loved just like Shinji does, just like Asuka does. Rei wants to be loved too, but Asuka, Shinji, and Masato are definitely like, they just want to be loved and seen. And Masato is no different than Shinji and Asuka. She just wants that. And the voice in her head is like, you're just using men to fill that void. And she's like, no, that's not it. So case 2. We have Asuka. Where am I? And then Shinji's there. This is the me that exists in your mind, Asuka. And so Asuka's like, they're all merging together, right? So we have the idea of Asuka Langley. And she sees Shinji, which means it's also the me that exists in your mind. So we're going through the same thing with Asuka that we did with Masato. Part 1, the case of Asuka Langley Soryu. So there's going to be a part 2 with Masato and a part 2 with Asuka in the next episode. Fun times. And he's like, what do you want? And she says, I want to live on my own. So she wants to be independent. She wants to be self-sufficient and independent. Again, like Masato does not want to be codependent. There's that. She wants to live on my own. I don't need mom or dad. I'm going to live by myself. I'm not going to cry anymore. And so again, like Masato, her child version says that she's crying all the time. And Masato's like, no, I'm not. Asuka's like, I'm not going to cry anymore, even though we've seen the opposite. But I'm still crying. Like her and Masato, why am I crying? And it's, I don't know how to deal with that child. So we get this whole thing about the mom, the other mom that is a doctor, and her and the dad, they're being like, we don't know how to deal with her. We just don't know. Even doctors are human, as I've mentioned before. A woman like you having trouble with a child. So there's a concept there, right? So there's a concept of, one, that humans make mistakes, which is very true. But she's like, I'm a doctor, but I'm also human. Like, I may have all this like authority and be able to save lives, but I'm only human. I'm going to make errors. But then the guy says, but a woman like you having trouble with a child. Like, it is the assumption, there is the assumption that women are good mothers. Not true. Not true, my friends. No, there are many women in this world that are not good mothers, that are actually really bad to their children. And it's a sad fact, but it's true. But this man is assuming, he's like, well, you would have trouble with a child. And so instead of blaming it on the fact that it's the woman's fault, because maybe she's not a good mom. Instead, they're blaming it on Asuka and saying, well, she's oddly mature. Like, it's kind of maybe her fault. There's a sense of vigilant and absolute rejection. Like, they're saying that it's Asuka, this child's fault that she's being rejecting. And I'm like, or maybe you're just not a good mom. Or you're not a fit for her. It scares me sometimes. Like, they're putting all the blame on Asuka. Haven't you ever felt that way, dear? No. Only, but he's like, you're Asuka's mother now. So it's going back to that conversation that she was listening to on the other side of the door in episode 22 when they were like having the affair and everything. You're her mother now. But before that, I became your wife. And he says, you became both at the same time. Like, yeah, because you married me, you got Asuka. So they're married now. And I like the Asuka like slowly becomes more of like a sketch. And she's like, well, I guess so from a social standpoint. But you can never stop being that child's father. Right? Whereas I can quit being her mom at any time. So at that point, the stepmom is establishing her limits. And the thing about it is, it's kind of crazy, is that the dad did abandon Asuka. The stepmom saying, well, I can leave at any time. I'm not her birth mom. I don't have responsibility for her. I married you, but I'm not taking responsibility for Asuka. But you're her dad. You should take responsibility for her because you helped create her. And the dad, ironically, is the one that ends up abandoning her and leaving her with the stepmom. And the stepmom stays around. That's the crazy thing, right? That's what ends up being crazy about it. And he says, true enough. And she says, don't, Mom, don't quit being my mother. I'll be a good girl so you'll like me. So don't quit being my mom and look at me. And then we see the mom looking at the doll instead. Don't kill me. So then we go back to the actual mom. So the question is, was Asuka wanting the stepmom to notice her or the real mom? I think it was the real mom. She realized the situation with the stepmom and her father and was like, she's like, Mom, don't leave me. Like, if you leave me, I'll die. Like, I can't go on without you. And the mom's like, your dad doesn't love your mother anymore. He doesn't need me. So there's that tie to Asuka not being needed, that sense of rejection. There's a tie of Rey not being needed anymore. All of the parallels. He's like, your dad doesn't need me anymore. He doesn't love me. He never loved me to begin with. So then there's that concept of, was Rey ever loved to begin with? Masato's like, was I loved to begin with? That goes back to Ritsuko. Was I loved to begin with? Asuka's mother is tying to Ritsuko and the idea of being used. It's not just Rey being used by Gendo. It's the idea where Ritsuko and her mother were like, we're just being used by Gendo. They don't love us. And so Asuka's mom's having the exact same issue. She's like, that man never loved me to begin with. He probably didn't need me from the start. He probably just took pity on me, which kind of connects to what Masato is afraid of. She's afraid that she's just using people. She doesn't want to be like Gendo in the situation. Masato's like, I don't want to be viewed as somebody that was using someone. Again, tying back to Shinji's disappointment. She's like, Shinji's being used by everyone. I don't want Shinji to feel like I'm a user as well, right? So that ties back to that too, and it ties to Asuka's mother being like, he didn't need me, he was just using me. It's all just like merging together. She's like, so die with me because your dad doesn't need us. So when Asuka says, don't kill me, she's like, don't ask this of me. That her mom wanted Asuka to die with her. Almost like it's a revenge. Almost she's like, well, we'll make your father regret everything because he doesn't need us. Die with me and then we'll just end it together. And Asuka doesn't want to die. She's like, am I a bother? Am I not needed? Again, am I not needed? She gets on a Shinji for that. And then the mom kind of looks like Asuka. She seems like she has red hair and her face kind of looks, the shape is similar. She says, die with me, and she breaks the doll. She takes the head off the doll. Kind of like the angels have been decapitated. Fun times. Kind of like how Rey's been decapitated too in the tanks. Fun times. And she says, I'm not your doll, Mom. I'm different. I think for myself and live on my own. So Asuka is not a doll to be controlled. She wants to be what Shinji doesn't realize he wants to be. Asuka's like, I want to be independent and be in control of my own life. And Shinji kind of wants the same thing. He just hasn't realized it yet. But Asuka just wasn't able to do it. seeing that mom hanging there. At the time, my mom was hanging from the ceiling. And the expression on her face looked very happy. Like she was happy she died and took control of her life. Kind of like Kaoru smiling when he died. He wanted to take control of his life. And there's a concept, there's a concept in Attack on Titan and both Vinland Saga and Attack on Titan of there being freedom in death. That's in this show as well. But I'm glad we didn't get to see her face. I thought when she said the expression on her face looked happy, I'm like, oh no, if you show us that woman's face, I will freak the fudge out. So thank you for not doing that. But she's like, I hated that look on her face. Because she's like, you shouldn't have had to die. She's like, you shouldn't have had to get to that point. She's like, why are you happy that you're dead? She's like, you should not have gotten to that point. Not only that, but she's like, you were happy dying and leaving me alone? How could you? Like, there's that too. Like, Asuka feeling that, like, be a sense of abandonment. Like, why were you happy you abandoned me? Like, there's so much in this episode. There's so much. And she's like, I don't want to die. I don't want to disappear. She's like, I don't want to go. And Rei is kind of coming to that same conclusion too, that she doesn't want to disappear either. So going back to this, and I think we'll just stay here the rest of the episode. So going back to this, I'm going to put it here, is that Asuka and Rei and Masato, they do not want to die and be nothing again. They're not on board with this at all. Seemingly. They're not on board with Gendo's plan. No. She's like, I hate boys. I hate my mother and father too. She's like, I hate these people that are just abandoning me and everybody. None of them are helping me. No one will protect me. No one is staying with me. I'm alone. What does she want? She's like, that's why I'm going to live by myself. She wants that for Asuka, that loss in her heart, that void. We see that Asuka believes that being alone and self-sufficient will fill that void. We see that Masato feels like being with others will fill that void. So we have that. That's why I'm going to live by myself, but I don't want to. It's hard. She's like, I don't want to do it. It's hard. And so that kind of ties back to Shinji being like, I didn't want to kill Kaoru, but I feel like I have no choice. Like, I'm just trying to she says, I don't want to be alone. Yep. They don't want to be by themselves. And then we see Masato and Shinji on the stage with the spotlight as well. And there's the concept that says, don't forsake me. Don't forsake me, which is coming, don't abandon me. All right. Don't abandon me, don't forsake me, and don't kill me. Coming from Shinji, Masato, and Asuka. So they don't want to be abandoned, killed, or forsaken, which is what's been happening to them their entire lives. And then we see Shinji in front, like in the blue chair, watching all three of them. And he's like, what is this? And then we see Masato beside him. So we're back in Shinji's thoughts. He's like, what the hell has been this whole thing this entire time? And Masato's like, the human instrumentality project your father was working on. And he's like, excuse me? And he's like, this is it? Really? It appears to be part of it. Okay, so it's part of the plan. Because the truth eludes us. So we get this idea that the truth is eluding us. And that's kind of the whole point of existence, is that you don't know the meaning of life. The whole point of existence is you find it for yourself. Like, it's different for everyone. It's not the same. It's not a one size fits all, right? And so only what you can feel for yourself right now is fact. And that's Ritsuko talking. So the truth eludes us, and what we feel and know in the present is our lowercase truth. So only what we feel for ourselves right now is the fact. Like we can't see the future. So only what we experience is our own truth, right? And so it's within you. Yes. And the memory of those things will become the truth for you. And I like that we get Fuyu-chan as that. Fuyu-chan shows up for like a pop-up cameo right there. But Fuyu-chan, I want to make note that Fuyu, the tie to memory becomes truth, right? For you. And so that ties back to a few episodes ago when we were talking about Fuyu-chan's memory of Yui is his truth. And so how he remembers things may make him somewhat of an unreliable narrator. And I was like, that all ties there. It's great. And I wanted to get a picture of Shinji with the shadow over his eyes. It's really good. There are some truths that change with time. Yes. And time can change the truth. Absolutely. Your mind can change. You can learn new things that alter the way that you've perceived things previously. Yes, absolutely. This is fact, the result of everything that was done. This. And Shinji looking at himself. Oh my God. There are a lot of realities, and this is one of them. So we talked about the harsh reality that's brought up. So there are reality. There are many. This human instrumentality project is one possible reality. There, and this is one. Yeah, this is only one reality. Reality is different for everyone because your experiences and everything change it. So what Shinji experiences is different than Asuka, different than Masato, different than Rei. Everyone has their own reality that they're living, right? And so this is a result of what you wished for. And Shinji's like, the one I wished for. And then that's when Rei comes in and says the annihilation, a world where no one is saved. So they basically, this project, I feel like there's a little manipulation going on here where it's saying that Shinji wished for the world's annihilation. Shinji wished for this. And it's like, wait, now what about? It's like, now wait, hold on. And then Shinji's like, excuse me, wait, what? He's like, no, it's just that no one saved me. And so Shinji counters and says, he counters with that no one saved him. He's like, no one saved me. That's not the case. He's like, wait, hold up. He's like, no one saved me. She's like, no one can save you. And then there's the idea that no one can save you. You have to do it yourself. You can't rely on others. That's the point. You want it to be relied upon, but you can't rely upon others. And then Kaji shows up saying, this is what you wished for. And Shinji's just like, what the hell? Destruction, death, and the return to nothingness. And Shinji's like, and Asuka says, that's what you wished for. This is reality. And so it's very Twin Peaks. It's very weird. I love that shot of Shinji looking at Masato like, what the hell? And he's like, what is reality? Like, what even is it? It's your world. So reality is your world. It's what you make of it. Mm-hmm. It's your own world where you coexist with time, space, and other people. And Shinji's getting more freaked out, like he's just sweating more and more with it as we go. It's a world where you decide how to perceive, where you yourself decide how to perceive and accept it. So reality is your world, and you decide how to perceive and accept it. No one will do it for you. No one is going to give you the answers. You have to find the answers for yourself and shape the world yourself as you see fit. Mm-hmm. Right. This is your world where everything is given to you. So yeah. So basically what's being told by Maya here is that the answers are given to you. You just have to find it and choose whether you accept them or not, or if you're going to try to change those answers. It's like you ask all these questions, but the answers were right there in front of you. That is reality. This is your world which cannot be helped. It's a world where everything is already set. And there is a little bit of like, there, because I don't like the idea of like everything's already set. I feel like there's too many things that I don't like the concept and the philosophy that everything is already set in stone, because I'm like, I feel like every one of us, if we're going along with this concept, and Shinji kind of counters with, is the world already set or not? But I disagree, because I think that like this, you decide how you perceive reality and you either accept it or you change it. And if it's altered, then that changes what was already set in stone. So it goes to say that Shinji did have a choice to kill Kaoru or not, and he chose to kill him in the end. You're wrong. It's a world where you make the decisions. It's like, no, you make decisions. The world is not set in stone. You choose to alter it, right? You make the decision, and that's going to choose. It's a world where your heart has decided that it is so. This is reality. This is the way. Your will to live. Okay, and we have D4. We have E1, EU, E2, E3. So it's almost like we have D4, and then we have the 3 EVA units, and then F1, F2. So what does that mean? And it's like the stage is being set, right? And then there's the T, right? Like the T, right? The cross. The T for truth. Your thoughts of wanting to die, they are all what you wished for. So there's that T tape on the screen for truth, right? And so they're saying that your thoughts that you wanted to die, they are what you wished for. And so from there, he's like, you're saying that even in this darkness, and this world of half measures are all things I wished for. And it says, that's right. You wished for a closed world where you are alone, where you alone are comfortable. So it says that you wanted to die, you wanted a closed world where you are comfortable. Okay, where you alone are comfortable, in order to protect the weakness of your heart. There's a 3 on that door. There's a 3 on that canvas. I see it. And then we have all the lights, like the stage is set, in order to protect your pleasures in life. This is merely the result. Okay. And you wanted to protect those simple pleasures. And this is the result with the lights and everything. For people cannot live in a world that is yours alone. And we see the exit sign, like there's an exit sign where you can get out, right? And there's this concept that people cannot live in a world theirs alone. You can't live alone in the world. Like Asuka wanting to live by herself, that's not possible. It's not going to work. You can't do that. There are going to be others around you at all times that you're going to have to deal with, right? They cannot live in a space that is closed off. But you wished for the world that surrounds you, to be closed off. You wanted the world to be closed off from everything else. Your heart and mind eliminated everything that you didn't like. So this is going back to being closed off. So it's going back to episode 16. It's going back to the marble angel that he's like, you only focused on the praise. You didn't focus on the stuff. He's like, you eliminated everything you didn't like from the world, but you can't do that. You have to live with both the good and the bad and work through it. You can't just live a life where everything's hunky-dory and you're closed off from the world and everything just goes the way you want. That's not living. So it's trying to tell him that, this voice in his head, and you wished for a world as solitary as possible. And that has led to this little haven for your soul. So that solitary confinement led to this little haven for your soul. But you can't go out in the real world and expect that all to work out for you. And then we see Gendo. This is one of the many ends that could occur. So that's the thing. So the ending here, so the destruction of the world, the destruction could occur. This is not necessarily the world ending. At the Human Instrumentality Project, she says this is one of the many ends that could occur. It's not set in stone yet. right? This is the end of the world that you have brought about. And the journey towards instrumentality will continue. Oh my God. Oh my God. Nope. So Gendo. So seemingly Gendo's plan in all of this is that Gendo wants to merge all souls together as one primordial soup entity. It makes sense. It makes sense because Gendo this entire series has been assessed as being inadept at living, that he's been nihilistic and believes there's no point in the world, and since he's lost the one anchor to humanity that he had, which was Yui, he's kind of gone off the deep end. Makes sense that he would spend the next years of his existence trying to construct this project that would basically render all of humanity and all of his suffering into nothingness, to where they can all go back to step one and maybe we'll figure it out the second time around. Makes sense. So that all gets established, but the question is, going into this series finale, I've got a lot of questions. What is Seal and Simon Says' point in all this at any point? Have they just been abandoned? What about Keel and the other Evas? Do they serve any purpose at this point? What's going on there? Do we have to gather them all together into like a circle like Stonehenge and then they activate the third impact? Is that it? Is that the third impact? Is the Human Instrumentality Project connected to the third impact? Okay. Who killed Kaji, Masato, and Ritsuko? Assuming they're dead, who killed them? Where are their bodies? What's happening? What is that? Where is Fuyu-chan? Fuyu-chan, does he have a role still to play? What about Maya and Alba and Hyuga? Are they alive? Are they dead? Did the people, did Ida and Toji and all of them really go to another city? Or are they all tied to this Human Instrumentality Project too and they're part of the soup already? What is that? What about Adam? What about the atom in Gendo's hand? What about that? Where is that going? Can Shinji alter reality to save the world? Does he want to? Here's the problem. Shinji, this entire series, has been struggling with the concept of his purpose, of what he should do, what his actions are, what his options are, and he's struggled with this concept of being in control of his own destiny. Shinji has been, the whole OP itself is like, go boy, become a legend. Like it's already been chosen for Shinji. And Shinji's just kind of gone with the flow and accepted reality that, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be this person that saves the world. Okay. But he's not done any thinking and deciding for himself. And so now, when the world is on the brink of complete annihilation, this instrumentality project is telling him, the thoughts in his head are saying, well, this is what you wanted, right? You originally didn't want to kill Kaoru, right? If you didn't kill Kaoru, we were all going to die anyway, right? So this is what you wanted. You wanted the world to be destroyed. Well, now you're going to get it. It's fine. And Shinji's like, well, wait, I don't even know if that's really what I wanted. So Shinji's having this giant existential crisis. Is he actually going to get his final resolve and say and override all of this? Or is he going to end up going along with Gendo to appease his father? Because at this point, if Shinji decides to counter the Human Instrumentality Project, he will be going against his father's wishes. And that will go against everything he said he's wanted to from the start. He said he's always wanted his father's praise, even though he hates his father. Is he going to go against Gendo and go against getting that praise, or is he going to go along with it to get the praise? What is he going to do? Masato being dead, how does that work into this? Asuka and Rei, what are they going to do? Rei seems like she's the catalyst to this Human Instrumentality Project. Is she going to retain any autonomy, or is she just going to do what Gendo wants her to do? Is Asuka going to be able to have any independence and way to fight back in this. At this point in the series, I really went into this series not anticipating it to be this dour and despairing in the final hour. And I know I was a sweet summer child for thinking that, right? I was a sweet summer child for thinking that. I started the series being like, wow, Asuka and Shinji and Rei, they'll battle those mechs and save the day in the end. Now we're talking about like the world becoming primordial soup and them all just kind of accepting that the void in their hearts can't be filled, and so this is the way. And it's a big psychological mess and everyone's in despair. Was not thinking we'd be there at this point. So again, if we go back to the psychosexual analytical development thing, the lenient phase was deciding to mature or remain stagnant, right? So I feel like that is the big catalyst. We're reaching the end of the lenient stage with this episode because Shinji's either going to make a decision. He is either going to act for himself as an independent adult and transition into adulthood, or he's going to remain in this child state where he's either seeking the appeasal of someone else, whether he cannot make his own decisions and he's dependent upon somebody else, or that he decides that he just wants to give up and doesn't want to mature into adulthood. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And we're seeing from like Asuka, from Asuka's perspective, she wanted to move into adulthood, but she's hit a wall and she doesn't know how to overcome it. With Masato, she kind of realizes she wanted to stay codependent in that childlike state of kind of innocence and being able to do whatever she wants, but she couldn't accept that adulthood and what comes with it. That whole being dirty aspect of it was kind of like that rebellion in a sense. And for Rei, she's kind of accepted that she doesn't really know if she's an adulthood or childhood herself. So the question is Shinji, when we get to the genital stage, which is the next stage, is Shinji going to be in a state of balance? I laugh as I ask that question. Is Shinji going to be fine? Is Shinji going to find that balance? I'd say it's a stretch to have our character go through this 25 episode long existential crisis and in one episode have everything solved. I feel like the series is not going to end well. It's not going to have a happy ending. Or we're not going to get some type of ending until end of Evangelion. We're not going to find any type of remote resolution until end of Evangelion. I'm thinking that's the case. I don't think in 25 to 30 minutes in the next episode, possibly, we're going to be able to answer all these questions. I don't think all these are going to get answered in a 25-minute span. But we do know that we had part 1 of Asuka and Masato's journey, so we still have to touch on if there's a part 2, and then Shinji coming to terms with. But the fact of the matter that's so frustrating is that these characters don't seem to want to become in the primordial soup that Gendo has planned. They don't seem to want to go along with the plan. They're being forced to. And I'm always kind of against characters that are being forced against their will to do something. I'm like, no, resist, fight back. But how can they? Masato's probably dead. Asuka and Rei can't seem to fight back at this moment. They're being pushed along. And Shinji is kind of being pushed along. So what do? Is Shinji already primordial soup? It seems like he is. But I just love the representation of a stage, of a theater, of a production, that it's all tied to how they've all presented themselves at this point in the story. It's fascinating. And this episode was a lot to process. A lot to process. I definitely feel the end of Evangelion I'm going to need multiple days. Because it's an hour and a half long. My brain is mush. And I don't know what else to say. So I hope, please no spoilers for End of Evangelion or the rebuilds or the end of this series. It's going to come up next week. But I'll have episode 26 is next week. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure everything will be kosher. No worries. We got this. So Shinji's got this, guys. We can depend on him. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Neon Genesis Evangelion.